Good evening and welcome to the March 5th special select board meeting for the town of Longmeadow. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. You'll notice up on the front edge here, you'll hear a lot of coughing and gagging today. Every one of us seem to be trying to get over with this latest flu cough or whatever it is going around. We have a very abbreviated agenda tonight. We have 3 items on the agenda. One is the capital plan presentation, the financial subcommittee presentation, and the FY 2016 budget discussion. I'll start. I don't know, are there any select board comments before we start tonight? No comments? Town manager, any comments?
No.
Okay, and there is no visitors in the audience. We'll assume there's no visitor comments. So I guess we'll start with Dr. Metz with the capital planning chair. He's going to give us a presentation or give us a talk through of the capital plan for this year. It's all yours, David.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. I have previously distributed a copy of our report and recommendations to the committee. Just to summarize, we received from the town manager a proposed budget that was funded from various sources, including the Water and Sewer Commission funds, and the hopefully receiving some funding from Community Preservation Committee, who have purview over the Community Preservation Act. The rest of it was requested from the general fund. So the total asked of us was approximately $1.25 million. We had several sessions and received testimony from the town manager and some of the department heads, including the DPW head and the fire chief, who discussed their reasons for the request. I must interject a personal opinion. I want to thank the town manager and his executives for preparing a much better organized request than we have received in the past. So I want to thank you. As you notice in your handout, we use several other written reports that we have received in the past and we've talked to you about, including the excuse me, the fleet report, which was requested by us and as well as the select board a couple of years ago to help determine what the DPW fleet should consist of. I do have some commentary that I won't read in your handout that talks about our thinking about some of the specific requests, and I'll be happy to take questions on that later if you have any. Yes, sir.
Can I just clarify, because you've been referring to handouts. I've got something that says Capital Planning Committee FY 2016 Capital Budget Recommendations, which was a Word document of 3 pages, and then there was something denoted as Appendix A, which is like a spreadsheet.
Yes, sir.
Are those the 2 things you're referring to?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. No, that's right. I mean, and I just want to make sure there's nothing else.
No.
Okay.
Okay. I have on the Appendix A, which is what you have, the final recommendations of the Capital Planning Committee. We were told by Mr. Pasurzik that our funds are approximately $1.3 million, $1.36 million, and we tried to stay underneath that level. There's an additional monies from previous years added to that. So our total recommendations are approximately $1.25 million, with some suggestions about other funding, other projects that could be funded if funds permit, which is all summarized in the report I distributed. So don't know if there's, that's the summary that I wanted to give you, and then open to questions.
Any questions?
I do.
Okay.
And again, it's just sort of a way of just make sure I understand because there's appear to be some codes or some sort of shorthand notations, and I just want to make sure I understand them all.
Those, meaning on the far right-hand, those particular codes?
Yeah, like for in comments, like for one, it says SC3. I wasn't sure what that meant.
I can go through. Yeah, this document he submitted back is based off of the master that we produced with our recommendation. I think I sent that out to the board previously.
Yep.
So we shorthanded certain things. There are abbreviations. School committee. The SC3 means that project was the third highest priority for the school committee. DPW ranked. Some of the feedback we got last year was that we didn't the capital planning committee didn't know what the prioritization list. The projects were all presented kind of in a lump sum. So we decided one of the many changes we made to how we presented the recommended plan to the CPC was including prioritization. So obviously CPA is Human Preservation Act, DPW is DPW, SC School Committee, and then on the side, Center, Glenbrook, Williams, LHS is the high school. So that's but the abbreviations and numbers are rankings.
Okay. The other question I had, again, it relates to the comments. There's some notations that say CPA did not approve, and then in the next column it says TM agrees. I assume that means town manager. So I guess when it says TM agrees, does that mean TM agrees not to have that project, or TM agrees with the project?
No, TM agrees with the CPA.
Which is to say not to have it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so I guess that sort of led to another question, which was if the town manager, I guess I was thinking that these projects came to you because the town manager had proposed them.
Yes.
So I guess that's why I wasn't clear on, I mean, if the town manager agreed that we should not have the project, how did it get there in the first? And maybe that's not a question for you, maybe it's for the town manager.
Well, actually, I can help answer it, and he will
Okay.
chime in. The CPA has its own funds.
Right.
Which it has purview over. So projects in the town really are divided into roughly 5 groups. One is, of course, the enterprise funds, and you all know about those.
Right.
So that's 2 the funding sources. I guess there's 5, I guess 6 as I count them through. Another set of funding comes from CPA.
Sure.
The group that they look at fall into 3 categories. One, which they have total purview over, like fixing up old houses and things. The second one is that they don't consider are things that are entirely within our purview that they do not look at, such as things that are not involved in the historic district, for example. And the third category is one where there's an overlap between us and the CPA. So they took the first look at the recommendations, and the town manager had provided projects that he thought would be under their purview. They have a limited budget.
The purview of CPC.
CPA.
I'm sorry, CPA. Your CPC.
Right, right. So a lot of our alphabet soup here.
Right, sure.
So CPA met before we made our final recommendations, mainly so we know what we didn't have to worry about. And when it said CPA did not approve, the items were ones that both of us were requested. When it says they did not approve, we had a discussion. It was an interchange between our committees and theirs, and most of these were kind of a joint assessment that some of them should be very far down the priority list. So when it says the CPA did not approve, the town manager said that he had other projects he thought were more important. So he approved or accepted the idea that these should be deferred until another year. Did I say it?
Yeah, I think that it's well said, Steve. I think we show the master list shows all of the requests.
February 3rd?
because the requests are, it's important to show what all requests, because I mean, all of them are needs. And one of the things, I did send a presentation of my own late in the day for you
Right.
guys to go through on your own kind of, it has a little more detail than what's here.
Sure.
And which is, the key thing is, at the top of the spreadsheet, you see what's available for funding, and then we always, when you put the lines together of what was requested versus what's available, unfortunately, not everything can make the cut. And so, again, another change we made to our process was in Community Preservation Act Committee technically calls themselves the CPC too, but in the process, in terms of our process, we call them CPA. They agreed to start their process earlier so they could be through their recommendations in time for the CPC, the Capital Planning Committee, did their deliberations to avoid overlap, because in past years, to get projects funded, the town would apply simultaneously to both. And it just seemed kind of an unwieldy, disorganized thing, so we streamlined it. And the two committees worked very well together. And so we show you all of the requests, and then the first blush were kind of the right-hand column you talked about, Alex, where either the DPO or the school committee made their prioritizations. I made my own prioritization based on conversations with both groups, and then presented some of those recommendations directly to CPA and then to CPC. But the reason why we show the whole list, even things that I prioritize as or did not prioritize as highly because of the limited resources, is because if either the Community Preservation Act Committee or the Capital Planning Committee feel that my recommendation isn't what they agree with, they can take a project that I didn't recommend and fund it. And so that's why, if I only show them the one they recommended, it would kind of be defeating the purpose. Does that, I don't know if
No,
that answers your
I get it. Yeah, no, that helps. And then a little further down, where it says DPW 8, there's two, this is at the bottom where it says parks. It says DPW 17, DPW 18, which I take to be at the low end of the DPW priorities. And then it looks like there's a 0 there, which I assume means that you guys were not in favor of it, Mr.
Again,
Metz?
we're prioritizing the projects.
Sure.
Those are expensive and to
Right.
be deferred. So-
Okay, so, and then where it says TM agrees, again, is that the same thing, Stephen, where you're agreeing with the prioritization?
It actually is they're agreeing with me, because I put the recommendation in, but it is basically where our evaluation of priorities lines up. I took the notation as TM agrees to be, they are concurring with my recommendation.
So, of course, we took everything that the town manager, his thoughts into significant account when we were putting this together. I did want to bring up some 2 or 3 items that we did suggest a different priority on. One of them is the allocation for the fire, new fire truck. The previous allocations have been $75,000 a year. The purchase of the Quint, or the proposal to purchase the Quint, pretty much has exhausted the replacement fund. The fire chief advises, as I said, the new truck is going to be needed in the next few years. He gave me the number 4. And in order to cover that cost, we thought it would be best to increase the allocation by $25,000 a year, so that we would have monies available to provide that. In the overall scheme of things, it's not very much. The reason for the recommendations for the equipment is this after conversations with the DPW director, who suggested that the grounds mower really is a backup lawnmower, and he would much prefer to have replacement for the 1-ton truck, which has a significant utilization rate. And it basically is now so that you can sort of see the road underneath the floorboards. So the loss of that truck for his fleet would have significant impact both in the summer and the winter, because it does a lot of plowing on the small areas. So we thought that that recommendation was appropriate to fund one-ton truck instead of the grounds mower, again, with their recommendation and their priority. And finally, the thing I wanted to bring to your attention was a question regarding the self-contained breathing apparatus compressor for the fire department. As I understand it, and I'll stand corrected if it's not true, they are having a new generation of breathing apparatus that the fire department uses when they go into burning buildings and so forth. The current compressor that they use apparently is not compatible with these new breathing apparatus. So that it seemed to us appropriate that, at least propose to you, that would be the highest priority of equipment should the funding permit. And after we did the math, it looks like it would. We did want to also point out, though, we're not really sure if the current location for the compressor is sufficiently stable or reinforced so they can take the potential problems with a new compressor should it have a catastrophic event, and that would need to be evaluated, because that would definitely add to the capital expenditures.
Right.
I think you lost me there. You didn't want to fund the compressor, but you said that you're
No,
expecting funding.
No, that would be the highest. When we first were putting the budget together, it wasn't clear if there were going to be enough capital funds available to, how far down the list they would go. So that should there be fund, it looks like there will be now, that we've made the calculations and taken some off and made some rearrangements, that I would like to propose, the committee would like to propose, not just I, would that the highest priority for those additional funds be this compressor. But we did not know exactly how much it was going to cost because of our lack of knowledge regarding the suitability of the current location for the compressor, because it is a higher pressure one.
Any other comments?
I just have some questions. I don't want to take up all the time. Is there anybody else? who
Yeah,
wants
go
to-
ahead.
Okay. Let's see. On the list of school projects, I see that some of them have a ranking for, there's an SC next to them, and some of them don't. And so I guess my question was, were the school projects something that the school committee had suggested? I mean,
They presented their list to the DPW, I think, at a meeting some month, like back in maybe November or December. In some cases, the notation there was like an SC commit, there was an SC rank and a DPW rank against the center school paving, but they, the CPC put a different notation down there to reflect that the CPA had not funded it. But I think on my original, there was a ranking there.
okay, so are we to assume that anything that's under the schools was something that the schools had recommended?
Mhm.
Yes, and you think the rankings are on your other sheet?
I think on the original we sent out, the rankings may have been there. Like I said, I think they changed some of the notation in some places.
If I could interject, so you understand what our reasoning was. We took the impetus to see pictures or the property in question. And I'll just go down them where we proposed what we did. The exterior stairs and ramp of Center School replacement.
Is this the terrace and balustrade?
No, it's the
thing?
one that's at the first of them.
Oh, okay, I got
All
it,
right.
okay,
CPA thought that they could fund that. Okay.
sure.
The boiler, the initial proposal was that the boiler in Glenbrook be replaced because of its incompatibility with the current air handling system and piping. The town manager took the initiative to go down and look at it and found out that the cost could be reduced significantly by just changing the mixer, and we thought that was a good idea. The exhaust fans in Williams are phase it finishes up the replacement that's ongoing, so we thought that important to fund. The playground area, again, is a reasonably high priority, but it was underneath all the other ones we've done, so that would be another area that should be looked at. The air handlers in Glenbrook, the ones that we have now are functional. They're approaching the end of their useful life. However, replacing them, I think, should be deferred until the deliberations, I say I, meaning the committee, should be deferred at least until further discussions on the future of the school, because they are serviceable and they will last several more years. We've already talked about the Russell Field and the terrace and balustrade replacement. We took a look at that. That's more cosmetic than it's not a safety issue. The library is another area that...
Could I just
sorry.
interject on, I mean, not interject, but ask a question. Did the school committee or anybody suggest that it was anything besides cosmetic? I mean, because I'm guessing usually when people propose something, they don't lead with, it's cosmetic.
No, they didn't say that. We took a look at it. And so
No, I get that.
I'm not sure. I was not the first person to get the recommendations. They were given to me by the town manager, so I'm not real
Okay.
sure what the thought was.
Okay, all right.
It is a fairly low priority for the school committee, and I...
Is a low priority?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Alex, I looked at the, I'm sorry.
No.
I did look at the original request sheet, and the notations that have been supplanted by CPA did not approve. On the center school balustrade, it was DPW, it was our fourth highest priority for CPA projects, not fourth highest overall. And then, excuse me, it was the eighth priority for the school committee.
It's in an area that is not used very much. As I said, it's mostly cosmetic. The other area that we made some significant changes was involved in the library. And this was in conjunction with the CPA again. The projects really overlap a lot. Their most important issue is the access ramp in the front of the library. When the ramp was first constructed, it did not meet code, and it certainly does not meet code now. It's also rather dangerous in the winter, such as we've been having, because of its steep slope. It requires fairly constant attention by town personnel to keep it free of ice. So we thought, and CPA also agreed, that this was an important thing to address. The sidewalks at the library are also under some disrepair, but it's repairing those really as an extension of the same project, because they're all hooked together. So the CPA decided that they would kind of put them all together. The one thing both CPA and our committee agree is that well, let me go back to the window replacement. Somebody went and one of our group went out and looked at the library, and apparently the real problem with them is that people don't close the windows. So we thought that that was a much cheaper option than buying a whole set of new windows. And as far as the service ramp, again, we investigated that, and this is an auxiliary access. It could be used, it is used, when it is used, as a way to bring supplies and books into the library. However, there is an additional one besides this one, so that we thought this was redundant, and again, only if funds allowed and some of the other priorities we recommended were not accepted. And finally, at the library, the driveway, both our committee and CPA assess this as more maintenance than capital or Community Preservation Act activity. So the sidewalk improvements were split away from the driveway improvements and put in with the access ramp.
Anything else? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Dr. Metz, I appreciate the work you folks have done. I've got the same date on mine as Richard does, February 9th in the upper right corner, but my numbers are different. And so I was just wondering if we could just walk through very quickly and list the projects and the amount that you are recommending for funding
Yes.
from top to bottom. So maybe I don't know if you want to go through it, or very top, there's a project development, $25,000.
This is something that we have recommended and
Right.
recommended funding for the last 2 years. And
Right,
something
and-
that one of the
and
previous
project
chairs of the,
reserve.
one of the previous chairs of the committee recommended it too.
No, I don't need to discuss them all, I just want to make sure I've got the right numbers. So under school facilities, your three recommendations are Glenbrook boiler for $30,000, Williams exhaust fans, $30,500, and center school playground pavement for $70,000.
No, that should be zero.
For Glenbrook?
Yeah, the CPTC recommendations are the one in the column that listed as
Yeah,
GF.
I got the same date.
Yeah, but look at the numbers.
Well, that's why I wanted to go through it, because I can't find it.
You've got mine, I think you've got my record, like I said, it's a similar format, so,
But it's got the same date. I mean, it's the same,
Yeah, I don't-
you know, if we're going to do
What number
that.
what number do you have in center replace playground?
I think
I mean, I can
Yeah, they
understand, I just need a clean set, that's
this,
all. I need.
this one says special copy for Mark Gold.
It doesn't say special copy.
No, because I have 31,000 for exhaust fans and zero.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
zero. So you
That's
got-
what I-
That's
one
the
on
correct one.
All right.
31,000 and zero for what?
For the play, we pay
Playground.
the playground in center school.
Okay.
Are there any other,
Well, I might as well just make sure that this is the right one. So then,
That looks like the right one, it's got the color on it.
okay, so it's 110,510 for the police department air handling equipment,
Right.
yes.
$100,000 for fire truck, 35,500 for voting equipment.
Hold on, let's go down here together here. 100,000.
What?
Okay, 35,500 for the voted.
Mhm.
44,372 for a backhoe, for half the backhoe, the other half to be split between water and sewer. Highway dump truck with plow, 162,300. Highway dump truck, 1-ton dump truck, 75,390. Right?
Is that, that's like shaded on mine.
Yeah.
The- It has no meaning, it just, that's,
Oh, the shaded doesn't mean anything?
No, it's-
Okay.
it has to do with my ability to use a computer.
Okay.
well, part of this, I was shading things that changed through the original process. And so part of
Okay.
that, I started that.
Is that to imply that this was a shady deal?
Yeah, it was mostly to imply that I shouldn't forget what I did in that cell,
Yeah.
in that
Yeah, there
Excel
was a lot of
cell,
color.
so that's why I put a shading on it. Sorry.
Any more comments?
There you keep,
I have one question.
Okay, Paul, and then Marie.
Dr. Metz, on the Williams, the Glenbrook boiler, where it was 195,000 originally to replace it, and then some more investigation was done, and it came up to 30,000, and from what the explanation, my understanding is it's more repairs than buying a new boiler.
The boiler itself is in good shape.
Yeah.
The issue was that the piping in it, as I understand it, was not compatible with the primary boiler at Glenbrook. I'm not sure how the original recommendation came from, but the town manager advised the committee that he had a heating and ventilation person come and look at the Glenbrook setup and said they can accomplish the same thing, but just replacing or changing this part to make the two things compatible.
So does it become more, is that more of a maintenance project than it is a capital project, or is it just because of the dollar amount?
Dollar amount.
Okay.
Well,
And it has more than a 5-year life expectancy.
I mean, the piping and the valve that are being replaced it's a pretty significant amount. I mean, it's a heavy-duty bunch of work. And he's right, we thought, because the boiler that is the one that was subject to replacement was transplanted to Glenbrook from the old high school some years ago. And what we had heard was they don't work in tandem. The two boilers at Glenbrook don't work in tandem, so cold winters like you have, one boiler is really getting maxed out and the other one can't contribute. And when we went through this over the summer with Williams, I learned that the contractor pointed out that they have there's two different kinds of valves. One's like a butterfly valve that's 3 ways that they have at Glenbrook as well that prevents it from working together. And then the other one's called a blend pump where they both contribute hot water to the blend pump and all goes through. And with the fullest extent of my knowledge on boilers and valves and blend pumps, I said, well, would that work over there? And they went and took another look at it, and it turns out that it would. So that's why we were able to supplant. And then we had our HVAC engineer go back and say, well, look at the boiler anyway, because I don't want to do this and either A, have to rip this piping and valve we're about to put in out, or B, do this and still need a new boiler, next winter. And they both the contractor and the engineer went back and verified that the boiler is in good repair, and that even if it did quit, the piping and blend pump would be useful to any new equipment.
Marie?
I want to thank you for the work you've done. You really dig down into the projects, and I think you made some very thoughtful decisions. Especially I like the way you've now coordinated even more this year with the community preservation, and the way you've laid it out here, giving us what the priority numbers are, as well as letting us where the water and sewer. I think it really pulls it together very nicely. And I like your idea that you have going forward about seeing projects on a quarterly basis to sort of tracking where things are. So I think it's a nice evolution from last year, so thank you very much.
Okay. Bill?
So, in your memo, you referred to the Greenwood pool improvements, and you said this should be deferred pending discussion regarding the eventual plans for the Greenwood facilities. And I guess, for me, that was the first time that I had heard anything, aside from something that I read on Mass Live, which I took with a grain of salt, that there was there was an issue with the Greenwood pool. So could you just fill us in on that?
The Greenwood pool requires a significant amount of restorative work. There is discussion in the town's executive branch as to the advisability of putting that much funding into a pool that really has limited use. It has significant use in the summer programs for children, but it does not have nearly the breadth of usage from the entire town as the one over in Bliss Park. So there's the question really is should that pool be kept open with its requirement for this extensive repair in addition to the additional personnel required to staff it, rather than try to expand the facilities over at the Bliss area.
I'm sorry, what was the last, with the expansion?
Well, instead of expanding the facilities at Bliss to take over the programs at the other pool. Did I say it correctly?
If I may, this started last year as well, and I've been working with the Parks and Rec director, as well as the DPW who maintains the pools, to look at, just ask the basic question: does the town need 2 pools? Similar to the question, similar to the thought of consolidating middle schools, which is being discussed by the school district. If families are getting smaller and there are more options for pools, clubs, and private pools being installed, on a yearly basis, is there still a demand for 2 pools, or would there be a higher demand for like a bigger splash pad than they have there presently? And we've looked at it several different ways, and unfortunately, it's one of those things where there's not a clear answer. And so, when we get into the capital planning process next year, I think, we're going to monitor the use more closely this summer and really try and test it. But then we get into capital planning, and I think ultimately, there's no clear answer emerging to me where it's a huge benefit to not have one, and it's a huge benefit to have it. And so I think it'll end up being a town meeting decision, whether or not we have the 2 pools. But that was, and I had shared that. I think I've shared that or reported on that here too. But I had shared that that's one of the reasons why I did not prioritize Greenwood. The DPW says that some of the leaks and things like that that they have there are sustainable as we evaluate this. It's a lot of money to invest in something if we're gonna have declining season passes and daily passes and things like that. But there is no doubt that the daily rec programs that occur over at Greenwood utilize this heavily. So, I mean, there is a need for it. It is just how pronounced is the need is what we're trying to evaluate.
Okay.
And you just said sustainable, you said the DPW said it was sustainable?
I don't mean like an environmental standpoint, but it's not, I mean, it's not like the pool, the pool is built into the side of a hill. So it's not as if it's gonna split open and, have to be closed. It's,
So it can, or is your point, it can continue to function without the repairs?
yes, as it has been. I mean, it's essentially status quo. But at some point in time, it may deteriorate where you won't be able to have it open, but we're just not at that point yet.
Anything else? Okay, my turn.
Oh, yes, sir. Sorry.
Oh, you didn't think you'd get away that quick, did you?
Yeah, oh, and sorry, Richard, and Alex, to your point, Greenwood Pool will be open this summer.
Okay.
So I just want to clarify that Greenwood will be open.
One additional, Ms. Angelides brought this up, and I forgot to mention it. One of the problems I think that has been ongoing, is from your point of view, is understanding where we are in the utilization of the capital budget that has been approved from the previous years. Mr. Crane is doing a good job, I think, of filling us in once a year, but when I was at the Community Preservation Committee meeting, they were not happy, that's a bad way to put it, they were dissatisfied with the level of reporting back to them about the projects they had funded. And they have recommended that they receive quarterly reports on the monies they have allocated, so they know if their allocations are being pursued. Because of the time between reports of these requests, we feel we have the same problem, and therefore we'd like to make the same recommendation that we receive a copy of the town manager's report on a quarterly basis, so that if there is a significant issue with the progress of the projects, we can keep you all apprised of that.
Yeah, there's a document called a completion document, which Stephen, I'm sure, is very much aware of. It should show all the contracts. It should show where every penny was spent, detailed pictures before, after, and it becomes part of the permanent building file. And I think you'll find there has always been a requirement. We just haven't been able to get those reports. They're very difficult. It's like as-built drawings when a building is finished. It's hard to get that final piece, but it's a very important part to track the projects. I also thank you for the work that you've done on this and your group. Both Mark and I, being from the Capital Planning Committee, I guess we're the only two. Paul, were you ever on there?
Nope.
Okay, but we understand the amount of effort that goes into this program, and it's a large undertaking. I do have a couple of questions. I noticed exhaust fans from Williams is on there again, says final phase. Well, I hope it is the final phase.
I have been assured that it is.
Because I think that the final phase started when I was on Capitol, and it's going on and on.
Before you continue, I didn't notice, once again, we have, the intake forms and the cost estimates and things that we've traditionally gotten for capital planning. We have all those on file, but because we've added a lot more pictures and a lot more narrative, they're large electronic files, not really emailable. Certainly, if anyone on the board or if the whole board wants a more detailed presentation of, with that information, we'd happily provide it. Last year, we tried to do it on thumb drives because,
Right.
Google Drive wouldn't really work and it was crashing people's computers to download.
Right.
So we weren't sure how to deliver the information. If it's specific projects you want those forms and background material for, we can do that. If it's all of them, I would just say drop off a thumb drive and we can, upload all of that for you.
May I interject? I think that if the CPC is in that role, it would save you all a great deal of time of document review if we could synthesize our portion of the capital budget that we're involved with, so we can provide reports to you without your having to do it de novo.
The fire truck it was 50, we took it to 75, and by the way, I think it was 2 years, it dropped back to 50 for some reason, we're not unable to figure out why. You've taken it to 100, and I heard you mention that the fire chief says he's gonna need another truck in 4 years. I thought we were on a 7 to 8 year cycle, so I'm a little puzzled where he's coming up with 4 years.
This is the information he gave me.
Okay.
And his estimation of the cost of this fire truck would be about $375,000 or $400,000.
Right. Well, at 8 years, it'd be 600,000 coming in their fund. The only question I have is that I noticed that there's surplus coming out of the ambulance fund, and we bought a vehicle with the surplus out of the ambulance fund, and yet we've allocated more money out of our capital plan to be put in a shoebox, to be put away. And I wonder, and it's not for discussion now, I wonder if it's a future discussion to take a deeper look at that ambulance surplus fund and see if the funds are in fact if they can be moved around a little bit differently to disperse more money into our capital program.
The ambulance fund has enough to fund a new ambulance at this time, plus the car.
And
However-
the new ambulance is how many years away from replacement?
That I can't answer, but these are heavily used on short trips, which puts a lot of wear and tear on them, so I understand that.
The chief said this one would last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, the
and
one,
it's 2
we have
years old?
2 ambulances.
Right.
One is a Ford chassis model
We know all about that, but that's been replaced.
with the International.
Right.
But he still has one Ford that he would eventually replace with another International, and then
Right.
the one we have today would go
But
to.
the last one he got,
Yeah.
he stated that it would be 10 or 12 to 15-year ambulance, and that's less than 2 years old now, 3 years old max?
But I don't think that's the one that he would target for replacement. It would be the secondary.
Well, yeah, but we've never had 2 brand news.
No, right, and so when he goes to replace the Ford, the secondary ambulance, that'll be one brand new, and then the other one will be 3 years old.
They're nice.
He can, he can come here and speak to that. The other thing is those internationals, I think, are 2 or 3 times the cost of the
Right,
Fords.
yeah, because the ambulance has got quite expensive. I'm just more concerned with the fact is that we have cut a lot of capital programs over here, and we seem to have a surplus that's floating around here that they found a use for.
I don't know if the funds are restricted for how you can use them. We can, like I said, we can have the chief
Yeah.
come present that.
Well, I think a town manager would like to tell us.
Okay.
You know, I don't
get
think,
information on that.
because it's an administrative thing on the fund management, it's not so much the chief. There was one statement that is quite bothersome to me, and it was made by both Capital and was made by the Community Preservation Act people. It revolved around now considering asphalt to paving of parking lots as a maintenance item.
This is a repair of the current driveway.
No, it's not a repair, it's a total overlay. It's not, the whole thing needs mill and overlay.
Truthfully, it's full depth. I mean, the thing is all,
Yeah.
it was happening in the 90s, so it's a long time ago, but when you look at it, if you see the pictures, it looks like it just wasn't built with a thick enough
Right,
base
I've
course.
been there several times. and looked at
Yeah,
it.
but I will say, the idea to split off the sidewalk from the driveway was something we came up with to give some comfort to the CPA. Similar to the center school you could add the driveway and the playground
Okay,
repaving
well,
to
let
a
me-
road job.
Let me bring the point out again.
Okay.
Replacing asphalt is not maintenance. Pothole repairs, fog coats, striping, crack sealing is maintenance. Mill and overlay is not maintenance. If it is, then we need to significantly increase the Department of Public Works' budget to accommodate for that. And Chapter 90 dollars are not sufficient to take care of the main roads in our community, in addition to all of the asphalt surfaces that we've got at the schools and all of our other facilities. So I opposed that statement because that's really not true. If it was just a pothole, I agree, but that facility is far beyond maintenance. So, and the fact is, it was turned down on funding or consideration of funding based on that logic. And now we are going to we're going to do the handicap access, we're going to do all of the sidewalks, and we're going to leave an asphalt surface up there that I would consider to be extremely inadequate. Extremely inadequate. And that's why I had so much concern. I've looked at the project 2 years in a row. I've been a pretty heavy supporter of doing something at Soares Library. It's one of the heaviest visited facilities in our town besides our schools. And I hate to see this word interject itself and become a norm that we consider asphalt as maintenance, because we can't allow that to take place. And if it does, then we have to seriously talk about increasing the budget or putting money away, because Mike can't afford $300,000 and $400,000 like that. It's just way too much. That's my only point. I'm not blaming you. I'm just, the questions come up, and I will adamantly fight to change that terminology around. What is wrong with the air conditioning system in all of the police department?
It's an older system. It's in chronic need of repair.
Because I haven't heard anything about it. It's just popped up this year.
I think it was on previous year's request.
I don't know. I'll check back on some of my old records. I'm one of those people that has a lot of old records. So.
We are told that on a very hot day, the police department is almost unusable. because
Really?
of The temperature. That's
Yeah,
what I
it's
was.
undersized.
Too many staff?
Yeah, it's undersized for the building.
Oh,
that
okay.
it's into.
Is it an undersized thing?
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that I must add, I look at DPW's #1 priority and their #3 priority. Their #1 priority was the pavement preservation, and it was cut from $600,000 to $400,000. And their #2 priority, or #3 priority, was sidewalk reconstruction, was cut from $400,000 to $200,000. And guardrail replacement was cut from 50 to 25. My problem that I see with this, and I certainly understand the problem of pushing the dollars, but with the facts being known, the severity of the asphalt surfaces and sidewalks and guardrails in our community, I'm a little bit at loss as why there wouldn't be recommendations for, even at this point, if you must cut them, to come back and say we must bond. I don't know why there's not recommendations coming in to acknowledge the importance of these resources besides just slicing the dollars down. Because we're bonding water and sewage project, and we're even funding some of the water and sewage, and I would think, like there's a drainage project here for $219,000, which will likely last 50 years, which would seem to be an ideal candidate for bond, and yet we funded it with the release the FY15 Chapter 90 dollars. And yet we've cut these funds, fairly significant cuts, when you start taking a third of a program, and in the other case, a half of a program. And I guess I'm just talking. It's not towards you, Dr. Metz, and it's not really towards Tom, and I'm just expressing my feelings the way I'm seeing it, that maybe we need to reconsider how we do business. If we are going to allow them to be cut, then maybe we need to consider a different funding avenue or consider the possibility of bonding. Because that recommendation, I would hope, would come from capital. I think that's in the charge of the capital committee. And I do notice there is no bonding on those issues. I guess that's it. There was another thing, Stephen, as a general thing, and I'm not going to mention which project it was, but there was a side note in the program that stated low priority of funding permits. And I thought it was a very odd statement to be attached to a project that was on a capital program for this year. And I won't mention which project it was, but it was a side note, and I'm sure you'll see it later. It just didn't seem to fit.
I would say, I think it's a comparative value. Everything on here is a need, and we have a 5-year plan that has way more stuff than even these that are also needs. So the comment is well taken.
Yeah, I know, and as I say, we could talk all night, and I don't plan on doing that, but I've shared my concerns, and I will echo those concerns consistently throughout the year, because I think if we're going to do what we're doing, we've got to take another funding strategy, because these resources are not going to repair themselves. It's just not going away. They're getting worse by the day. And you can defer maintenance on a painted wall surface without any ill effects. That wall can sit there for 50 years. It just takes another coat of paint. But a road system will go from $4 a square foot to $150 a square foot, theoretically, with that decay. So these resources will decay at a much greater rate if we continue to bypass the importance of them and underfund them like that. And we're not even fully funded. That's why I hate to even see it start to underfund. That's my problem.
Well, in answer, and this is just speaking as for our committee, that's all I can do. We have a certain limitation on the funds under our purview.
Right.
And we try to allocate them as well as we can within that limitation. I think your comments about the importance of repairing, especially after just driving in over the north side of, into town over the north end of Long Meadow Street, I certainly echo your comment. However, we don't have the money that we have under our purview to cover that cost.
Correct.
So that I agree with you that if those are to be funded, then other sources of funding have to be found.
That's why my comments weren't directed to you. They were basically with the town manager and just for the sake of the board, too. And there's a point I noticed today. If anybody would like to drive on a very poorly designed section of road that's been there for years and we didn't know it till we got this deep frost heave, go down to Glenwood or Greenwood Center and drive in on the entrance road. Make sure you get your seatbelt on before you go. It's the worst frost heave I've ever seen on any road in my entire life. And it literally is, 7-8 inches of frost heave in there. It's just unbelievable. Because this year has been a significant year on damage. We may see damage in the spring that we haven't even guessed at yet when we finally thaw out. But I've never seen that road raise up. So apparently this frost this year, the depth of the cold has been significant on the resource. So I do thank you for what you did. You did a lot of great work, Dr. Knights, and your committee.
Richard, I just have a couple of questions, I guess, for us, and that is, the first one is, we have this recommendation from the Capital Planning Committee. We have a different recommendation from the town manager yet, again, and how do we reconcile the two? Is the first thing, because that kind of concerns me that we're coming with two different
I think they are together.
There are, on this presentation I sent out
On the final.
this afternoon, there is one slide that says the key differences that highlights it. I don't want to say they're minimal, but they're not insurmountable. I will say, I think, and I'm not sure what the dialogue was, but I think the starting point for funding, we had a different number for a starting point than they did. Our 2.5% number was a little higher, and I'm not sure what happened there, but so there could be funding to plug in, and I'm glad you said if funds are available, 1, 2, 3 here is our ranking, because it's possible that may happen. But I said not minor, but not major differences, and they're highlighted on that slide. I also would say that I noted there was plus 100,000 for the truck fund. It was plus 25 to get to 100 in that same presentation. But I will, Mark, I don't think there's anything that they've proposed that I think is unreasonable.
And I may have looked at mine and I kept seeing over the side, town manager agrees, and I assumed since there wasn't a big nasty face that said he disagrees, that there was agreement on everything.
No, I mean, I support increased funding for the fire truck fund. I mean, it's like you say, it's a.
What do you not support?
No, like I said, I feel like the center school paving is a was something that, like I said, it was on my list but not theirs, but it's not like a culvert on the verge of collapse. If we don't do it, it's not the end of the world.
Not
so
a Crestview Lane.
Or a life safety issue. Like I said, there are relatively minor differences. My conversation with the fire chief about the SCBA was that we could maybe go at it next year. But if he communicated that differently to the CPC, then that's fine as well. I mean, like I said, anything that's an important piece of equipment for our firefighters to have their equipment work, we support that too. So,
but there is an option there. You could get the tanks filled at a local place.
I think another fire department, I think maybe East Long Meadow has installed one already.
So it's not that we don't have a backup.
No, they're not
going
to asphyxiate in the middle of a fire.
Right.
No, we could do it. That's why we could defer.
Right.
It's the way I look at the capital planning process is it's like trying to assemble a puzzle, where the pieces are pre-cut, and you have a target. You have a size of a box you have to get it in, and sometimes you have to leave pieces out, or you try and cut pieces to get them to fit. But it really is moving things around to try and get it. And there's never Rarely is there an exact match within the confines of what you have.
I'm also glad that somebody did a little research on the Glenbrook boiler situation, because we're looking, obviously, we know that there's a statement of interest that will be coming in, so,
Well,
Rich?
yeah.
I'd like to pose a question to Dr. Metz. Well, and actually to the board generally, to follow up on your question about bonding. And before I do that, I neglected to thank you as well, Dr. Metz. I appreciated the thought that went into this as well. But was the possibility of bonding things sort of within your marching orders, or did you consider it within your, review, or did you kind of figure that you were just kind of looking at what can we spend this year?
We really don't have any say in what is bonded. All we can do is discuss what our recommendations are for the use of the capital planning funds.
Okay, so
Obviously, we consider the issues that Mr. Foster discussed, and we do have those discussions with the town manager, but that's more for our information.
Okay, so to Mr. Foster's point where he's talking about, cutting the pavement or sidewalk, I take it you all thought of that as just sort of a necessary thing to do to make the numbers work out?
It was on, Mr. Foster and the board in general has asked us to provide our recommendations in the overall frame of what the town is doing. That's why they're on there.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I think I had reduced those numbers before I submitted to the CPC.
Okay. So, I guess, to your point, Richard,
That's the guy we need to talk to.
well, I guess it's really for our discussion, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that we discussed last year was bonding certain things, and we did,
Right.
and we considered bonding sidewalks, and, that's something that we can take up.
Right, usually, it depends on the life cycle, and if it's a small life cycle, you wouldn't consider bonding, but, there are times, and I think if we ever go back to the original charge document for the capital planning, there was an expanded scope in there that really got into, you guys making recommendations for bonding and everything else. It was a fairly elaborate scope. And I think we drifted away with it because it was so in-depth that it wouldn't seem reasonable for the committee to embrace it.
That would really stretch our resources, to be honest with you.
Well, it's just kind of I guess it's an overall judgment call, especially as your group. You've got a good group together now.
Yes.
You got a strong group being built back again to where these discussions, every year there'll be more familiarization with the state of affairs. And so any contributions that you can make from the perspective of the expertise on the group is beneficial.
Oh, it was certainly helpful this year, I must say.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to finish up my thought process here. Just where I'm looking at this, I think that particularly because we've just approved funds to buy a new fire truck that hasn't yet arrived, to put away $100,000 into somebody said the shoebox or whatever it is, I think is a little bit much. We really need to find ourselves either agreeing to be on a cycle of 7 years or not being on the cycle of 7 years. And if we're not going to even try to be on it, then why are we putting any money away? And if we are going to try to be on it, then we don't need the $100,000.
The purchase of the Quint, we're no longer in a surplus situation.
We're down to zero.
We're below zero.
Right, but now we're starting again, and we have 7 years to save for the next truck on the old schedule, right? Now, you're saying the fire chief says he needs one in 4 years, which is why you put $100,000 away to try to get $400,000 in 4 years.
Yes.
Right, I understand exactly what you did. The question is, are we going to say, yes, in 4 years, we're gonna buy another fire truck? Or no, we set up a system that we wanna stick to that says we're gonna stretch them out, especially when we'll have a brand-new truck, which I assume will become our primary response truck. And between us folks here, you know what? When somebody decides in 2 years they want another Quint, somebody's gonna write another citizen's petition, and we're gonna get the money coming out of free cash anyway, or something like that. And so to put money aside is, it just seems to me, we're putting money aside that's counter to a policy we had long since established that says we're gonna wait 7 years between trucks. And Dr. Metz, I'm not criticizing you. That was what you were being told. I'm just saying, as the select board, should we say, we understand what, you'd like to do, whoever the new fire chief is gonna be, but the fact is, the town of Long Meadow can't afford to buy a new truck every 4 years. We're gonna make them last 7 or 8 years. And short of the transmissions falling out of them or the engine's dying, we're gonna ask the fire chief to stretch them out. And I think we've gotta make that decision. This is a lot of money to put aside when there's so many other things we can do. And I'm not opposed to saying, putting aside money for a fire truck that future. I was the one who started this 8 years ago or 10 years ago when I was on the capital planning committee. So I'm not opposed to putting money aside. I'm just opposed to putting this much money aside based on a significant change in policy that, I don't know if it's anybody's policy that's been accepted other than, somebody who said they want a fire truck in 3 or 4 more years. That's the fire truck money, and I think that would free up other money to do other things. I will also just say parenthetically that there's a request to buy a second car number 2 in the fire department, $32,500 out of the ambulance fund, and I believe that that's not the intended use of the ambulance fund. I go back to many years ago when I sat in the town meeting when the ambulance fund was established, and we have extended and re-extended and re-extended and defined and redefined and re-redefined the use of that ambulance fund to where it does all kinds of things now beside buy an ambulance. But at this point, I think this is out of bounds, and I'll oppose that vote, and that's just my personal opinion. Not that we may or may not need the vehicle. I'm just not convinced, based on my reading of what the town citizens did when they set up the ambulance fund, that they intended it to buy cars.
We had the same concerns, Mr. Gold.
I understand.
And the fire, this is going to be the primary fire car. The current one is really pretty obsolete or not serviceable. So they do need a car. The other one, the car number 1 is the fire chief's car, and you can decide how you want to use that or not.
Right.
But this is the one that goes out on all the fire calls.
Yeah, I'm not questioning whether or not they need it, because I have no idea. I'm just saying that I'm not convinced that that's the right use of the ambulance fund, that's all. I mean, they may very well need a vehicle, but I think we need to find the appropriate money. Like I said, the ambulance fund was set up for a very particular reason, and that wasn't it.
Any other questions? Dr. Metz? You've been released. Thank you.
Thank you very
Dr.
much for the opportunity to talk with you guys.
Okay.
Thank you. Take the rest of the committee, please.
And I was sitting here not looking at anything. Okay.
So Richard, what is the process by which we're going to get these items into a warrant article? I mean, are we going to say to the town manager, commit every one of these as the CPC recommended into the warrant article? Or are we going to take, although it's slight, the different one that we were just sent this evening from the town manager? I think we've got to instruct the town manager to construct the warrant for capital items from one of these documents.
Okay.
And to the extent that they're different, we've got to reconcile it.
Right, and I think we can. You're going to give your presentation, so we've got, a couple of nights' worth of meetings scheduled, so we've got enough time to work it out. Yeah.
I didn't get through the 45 pages that was sent. And you're saying the last slide is the one that shows the differences between the two? And if my understanding is correct, what you were saying is there's more money than CPC was working with, so that last slide will show the additions you were looking.
No, I mean, you really have to go back to the spreadsheets to see the differences. It just says, a few bullet points, CPC does not recommend center school playground, paving. They have a slightly higher amount. I don't know if it was a rounding thing or not, but I had 30,500 for the Williams exhaust fans. They put 31,000, and then they did not recommend the driveway. Those are really the key differences. And the only thing is, I had the SCBA as a lower priority for inclusion if funds became available than they did, but I wouldn't argue with their recommendations. They took a very thoughtful approach. But by and large, the vast majority of the recommendations are the same.
Well, as Mark's saying, if there are differences that need to go into warrant articles.
Well, I think what it'll come down to is, like I said, the vast majority, I can construct, if you accept their recommendations, then I can construct the warrant based on, because they're, like I said, virtually identical, the same ones I made.
We can run a vote on every item. I mean, it'll take,
That's fine, it'll take 3 days to do it, I mean.
we just want to
Yeah,
have
and it
discussion.
took an awful long time,
Yeah.
That's fine.
No discussion.
That's fine.
I think what I would say is, if you accept, because I do think, I guess, can I make a recommendation?
Yeah.
If there's no, just to keep things moving, if there's no objection to any one particular item, I mean, Mark, you made the comment about the ambulance fund, or the ambulance car, and that does go out on ambulance calls as well. In fact, I think that's its primary use. But I don't know what the ambulance fund was established to do, and I will get a report on
Right.
that from the fire chief.
Well, I had the same problem with Mark, which I expressed. The 100,000, and it's supposed to be 7-year replacement, and that gives us 700.
We'll look into
700,000.
how it was established and what the purpose was.
Yeah.
There is an ambulance policy that the board accepted, so there's a good guidance
Right.
within that policy itself. And the question is, does that vehicle go out on ambulance calls or not? Or are there medical services? That's how the policy is written. That fund can be used for equipment.
But that's a policy decision by the chief.
No,
To send
no,
that
this
car
is the
out.
Board of Selectmen's policy.
No, to send that car out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, so that's,
Right.
I understand the policy is for the select, board,
Right.
but the policy to run that vehicle is a
Right.
determination to have an extra body there, whether or not,
And I do believe I have an opinion from the Department of Revenue allowing use, or it would tell you what allowable uses are, and I will get that to you folks also. It'd be helpful from the legal standpoint too, to know.
And, like Mr. Cole, I wouldn't have a problem in the world dropping that $100,000 off that budget this year until it's settled. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem in the world, because if we're allocating $100,000 and we've got money that's generating out of the ambulance fund, I think we likely need to get some good answers on it before we do push forward.
isn't the determination I think Mark said it, that was done years ago. The policy was established years ago because we were going to town meeting and saying, let's fund a $350,000, $400,000
Right.
ambulance at town meeting.
Right.
And and I believe, Mark, you were probably on capital plan at the time where it was coming out of the capital budget.
Right.
So the idea was at that point, because I was on the finance committee at the
The
time.
years you bought a fire engine, you did nothing else,
Right.
or just about, that's right.
That's all you did.
That was the pain.
And that's what started it, because we
Right.
started talking about, well, we know we're gonna do it, but if we're gonna go through, as Mark said, what we just did, then if we're not gonna stick to the schedule of 7 years, then there's no reason to put money away. So the board should take a look at, is the policy put money away every year to buy a fire truck valid, or do you just go to town meeting and say, we wanna buy a fire truck that year?
Yeah.
Whenever it's determined that that's the need that year.
Right.
Because because either that or we stick to the 7-year schedule. And I understand the truck they're gonna replace is gonna be the worst truck in the fleet, which is the truck that probably never rolls right
Right.
now.
Right.
And if it's gonna be scheduled for 4 years, I guess we would need some conversation, perhaps maybe with the chief, or more documentation as to why it needs to be replaced in 4 years. But it's gotta be, as Mark said, I think it's one or the other. It's either you're gonna fund a fire truck every year and you're gonna stick to it, which we haven't to a degree, and this is definitely not gonna stick to that policy. Or we just use that money into some other project and go to town meeting every time there's a fire truck that's needed. You got,
Yeah. Alex?
On the fire truck, I remember thinking about this when we were looking at the age of the fire truck, and because this has come up a few times, and my recollection is that the two engines are both old.
Mhm.
They were similarly aged, like 20-plus years. And I remember thinking, we're going to face a point where you got to replace them both at the same time. And I guess that's what we're facing right now, is the fact, every 7 years makes sense if the two engines are not the same age. That would work. But, I mean, it seems like we're caught in a situation where we've got two 24-year-old engines. I mean, that's my recollection of how old these,
Right.
and which is why I think the fire chief is coming to us.
But theoretically, you would say that they would age at the same time, but as we buy a newer truck, they go into less and less runs.
You've got
Right.
two trucks that are, the chief's not here to tell us how many hours, but they're very infrequently used. They basically sit in the shed.
Both engines?
Yeah, you've got three
I
engines.
I don't know that that's the case, Richard, and like I said, the chief would speak to that better, but what Alex said is correct. From what I understand, and again, I was not here to hear it firsthand, but the 7-year policy was established, and then the purchase of the first truck to trigger the 7 years, the first fire engine to trigger the 7 years kept getting deferred. And so, but the trucks continued to age.
No.
Nope, not at all.
The first one was bought right. The second one was bought because literally the transmission fell out of it, and we bought the F-350 that time, which was cheaper than, and we essentially had, I think we were off by 1 year or something from what we needed. So we essentially had the money when that happened, and then the clock started for the vehicle that we're replacing this year, which we came up short of for capital because of the Quint. But there was all along, then it was gonna be some period of time before even that next vehicle was bought. That was the presumption. Yeah, we realized that somewhere along the line, you'd have a 26-year, 27-year-old, and then a 28-year-old vehicle, which you would trade in at the 28th year. That's the nature of the
No, I get
of this
that.
process.
But the thing that I also remember that made an impression on me, I remember asking the chief, how much is this used equipment worth? Because I remember I actually went down to the department and looked at the vehicles and you know, the old trucks, the old engines look nice. So I'm like, well, you know, there must be some value there. And I think he said it was worth $4,000 or $5,000. So, I mean, we basically had, so what that told me, when you have two 24-year-old engines, you really don't have much of anything. You know, you've got, you know, $10,000 worth of engines sitting there, you know, which isn't much at all, you know. So, I mean, that kind of tells me that there's probably not much life left in the other.
They've not, I think we're guessing. Why don't we,
I'll invite the chief
after
maybe
this,
Monday
the
night.
chief can get in, and I don't even think he needs to do it between now and then. Because this is a board decision at this time on that 100,000, whether we keep it in
That's
there.
right.
And, you know, we can authorize a new truck at any time.
I
take
think
it to the town
the
meeting.
point of the truck, well, Mark, I need to tell you
Well,
this.
then, you're right. I mean, we need to hear it from
The
you.
reason why I don't necessarily agree that it's an either-or is because the idea behind the truck fund, I'm guessing, is to save interest costs on bonding for new truck in case you don't have free cash to purchase one.
No, the idea was so you didn't use up half the capital stabilization fund the year you bought a fire engine.
But either way, it's setting a little bit aside to reduce large pain down the line. And I think, you know, I think that premise is still fundamentally sound, which is possibly why it was dropped down to 50. But I would caution against zeroing it out, is all I'm saying.
And I don't think anybody, at least I wasn't suggesting we zero it out. I was just suggesting that we put it on a different schedule. And that's, so I don't know if we want to talk about the vehicle. I pulled up the ambulance fund policy. But if you want to defer that, we'll defer it.
Why don't we defer and let you
Okay.
and Paul get into your dog and pony show?
There's no dog.
And then we can
approach.
get more discussion out.
We're
Can I
missing
just
a dog
cap-
and a pony.
Yeah.
We have a
Just
show.
for next steps, do you want Paul and I to draft articles for these things except for the ambulance request?
Can I ask, before you answer that, what I'd like to ask is, because I just opened this up, the thing that you sent today, it's the first time I've seen it. And what I have is a sheet, and the one that I was looking at that has the same date as yours, that had different numbers and that kind of thing. I like us to have, if we can have this on the next agenda on Monday to go over this, you know, maybe up here and talk about it, because it's definitely different than my first draft, and it's a little different than my second draft, and it's a completely different format. And I think,
pick it up there tonight, can't you, Stephen?
can you hook it up? That's fine, yeah.
You on an
I
app?
can do it. Do you guys want to go, or do you want to do this now while it's fresh in our heads? Because I was delayed in getting it out, I didn't intend to present it. I can, but I don't need, if you
I'm
guys
just
want to let
saying,
set and
but
go
that's
chew on it.
different, that,
Okay.
Why
I- I'm-
present it?
Well, because
I'll defer to you guys.
Stephen, it's a great PowerPoint presentation, but it rehashes much of the things that Dr. Metz already spoke about.
Yeah,
You know, it gives a little bit more detail, plus it has history of other projects in it that aren't necessarily what we're talking about tonight. I mean, it's great to have an update of the money we allocated last year and 2 years ago, but that's not, I don't think what we need to do. I mean, my biggest thing is, I'd love to get a spreadsheet that says, here's the CPC recommendations, here's the town manager's recommendations, and so we can see
I was
the
just gonna ask,
differences.
do you have it in this format updated?
yeah,
Do you
that's,
recommend-
Mark has that, that the one we sent out that I'd forwarded directly from Dr. Metz is the one where there are things highlighted, that's where there was some movement since the original requests or my recommendations. Like I said, it's the easiest thing to do, Mark, is to go to that last, I don't know what slide number it is, but it's close to the end. And literally, there's 3 things that are different, or
Well,
4
that's-
things.
When I said the presentation, I would just say present those 3-4 things different, because that's it, since it's fresh in our mind.
Yeah, I
Not
think,
the 45
it's just the
slides.
items that are
Yeah.
under discussion that you want to discuss, Stephen.
What are the 3-4
Whatever you guys
items?
want. I
Well,
also,
no,
whatever you guys want.
that's what I would like you to do, because that's what
Right.
Mark is after,
Yeah,
too. We want to know what is different. Where do you have opposition to this capital plan that's been put in that we may need to discuss?
Okay, I can, and I don't mean this
Is
to
that
put on the screen, it's just,
Yeah.
like I said, I did run through it briefly, but everything lines up with the CPA. Obviously, not everything that we feel is needed got funded, but in terms of what I presented to both the CPA and the Capital Planning Committee, the things that the Capital Planning Committee did not fund that I had requested, and again, I think there was some confusion about the starting point for the dollar amount. They rounded up on the Williams exhaust fans, $500. They added the $25,000 to the truck fund. They did not recommend the center school.
Okay, slow down. slow
Yeah.
down.
Oh,
Okay, so
Start over.
item number 3 is really, is
Yeah, that's easy.
30,500?
They recommended, in the exhaust fans, they recommended 31,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that was, I haven't asked Dr. Metz if that was just a typo or if the original request said it was 30,400 or something like that.
The school committee requested 31,000, the DPW requested 30,500. They must have just taken the higher of the two.
Okay.
Okay, so we figure that one's okay, right?
I gotta be honest with you, the reason why I identified it was because it took me a long time to figure out why I couldn't get the numbers to jive on the 2 spreadsheets, and I finally went through point by point.
Okay.
So then I had recommended out of the general fund, 2.5% capital allocation for FY16, I had recommended we spend the 70,000 to do the center school playground. They had said that they did not recommend that, but if funds were available, it was their second priority behind the SCBA.
Okay, so we should put down the 70,000.
Or just say.
It's your
that's my
recommendation.
That's my recommendation.
Yeah, because we're marking what your recommendations are.
And like I said, I had sent mine out, I think, a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago.
So on that spreadsheet, there's a little note to the right of that. You said it was the number 2 recommended project, and yet over to the far right, it doesn't say that
Which one?
for the repavement of the playground.
It says CPA did not approve.
No, go to the right of that.
I don't have anything to the right of that.
I have it on the spreadsheet.
There's like 7 different spreadsheets floating around, that's
It
the
says, it
thing.
says low priority of funds permit.
That's CPA's note. Or, sorry, that's capital planning's note, and that's basically reflected in their narrative.
Okay. But you just said that it was their number
I
2
was thinking about
priority.
No, number 2, if funds permit.
Yeah, it
Meaning
really
of-
extra money.
If
So
there's extra money.
even though they said it's low priority, they would fund it if there was extra money.
What I took that to mean was lower than the ones they approved or recommended.
All right, well.
So then the other one is, I had recommended $90,000 from our general fund allocation for capital to rebuild the driveway at the store's library. They, as he indicated, did not.
Okay, so stores, library,
Driveway
driveway.
improvements.
Okay, they put in 23,000, you would
No, that's-
include an extra
The
90,000 to
CPA
that.
funded the 23,000 in addition to the 139,000 because when we were discussing it with CPA, it occurred to us that it's largely concrete work, and if you're gonna rip out the stairs and the ramp, and you're setting up forms and pouring concrete, you might as well do the sidewalk while you're there. CPA agreed and kicked us extra money for that portion of the work. And then the driveway we did we split the project, so it would be about $90,000 to construct the driveway.
Okay, and that's your
Okay.
recommendation?
And that's my recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Difference?
No, I mean, I think,
So-
to be honest with you, I'd like to have the grounds mower too, but I accept that the CPA, I switched, I had the grounds mower in there originally, and the other truck started, quite honestly, falling apart. And so when we made the change on the Glenbrook boiler, going from 195,000 to 30,000, allowed us to move the police department HVAC into this year's recommendation, and left a little money where I was able to then recommend the 1 ton versus the grounds mower. And I had asked Mike Rabel, which do you want more? And he wanted the dump truck more, or needed the dump truck more. So virtually that's it, but the difference between the two things.
But
So-
I'm
Go ahead,
confused, because you said in the talks with Dr. Metz that the compressor, if there was money, the compressor would be paid for.
That's not what I said. That's what they said.
Oh, okay, so that wasn't in your inclusion, and
No.
you said you changed the fire truck dollar amount?
No,
in
they
yours?
did. They
Oh,
did.
but
I was still
yours-
75. My
you were
recommendation was still 75.
Okay, so you would still be at 75 and not the compressor?
Mm.
Okay, thank you.
So Stephen, if I can just summarize it. You would have added 70,000 for the center playground and 90,000 for Stores Library driveway, and you would have deleted 25,000 from the fire truck allocation and $500 from the exhaust fans.
I wouldn't even delete the 500.
Well, whatever, okay,
yeah,
that was just a,
basically,
yeah.
Yeah.
But, so your presumption was there was $135,000 more available.
I start you see the top of mine, this is where, and I sent this to them, which is why I'm confused how they didn't know where they were starting. We started from 1.435,
Right?
and they started from 1.3, as he said. And Paul and I talked about, we don't know where there was confusion. They had the spreadsheet, that the numbers across the top here of available funds hasn't changed really at all since we started having these discussions.
Would that have been when we changed the policy and we upped?
We changed the policy a while ago. It was 1.435 since last October.
Okay, so that wasn't during our discussions, okay.
I think it's just maybe some confusion. As we've noted, when you start looking at different spreadsheets, it can get confusing.
Do we want to have them just do the warrants, or?
I think we're thinking right now.
No, okay.
Stephen, if I add 135 to 1.249, that still is short of 1.435, am I?
Yeah, we ended up being like 18,000 short of the 1.435 in my
Okay.
final recommendation. And it just became, I guess we could have added 18 to, well, truthfully, we ended up,
To anything.
we ended up needing it to balance the budget. And it was so close that we couldn't fit another project in for, like, this, the puzzle piece analogy I was using, we didn't have an $18,000 puzzle piece. And we were trying to crunch the numbers to get the budget to balance. We left it
Well,
in the general fund.
18,000, okay.
Go ahead, Marie.
what about project development contingencies? I mean, we're always talking about wanting to engineer ahead of time. Could we just put the 18 there so we could engineer projects
No,
ahead
we've
of time?
actually put it into the budget. We're spending 18,000 less on capital because we're balancing the budget.
Oh, it went back to the budget? Oh, okay. I thought you were just
The
leaving it
answer is you
hanging.
could do it, but then you'd have a balance.
Then unbalanced budget. Oh, no, I'm not going there.
And part of the reasons we received this $240,000 infusion of Chapter 90 money somewhat unexpectedly.
By policy, Paul, what's the minimum ban?
Minimum ban,
Yeah.
I think it was $250,000 we put in there when we did the debt management.
Is that's
Policy.
policy?
Yeah.
Yeah, 250.
I mean, the other thing too, quite honestly, is, you're talking about reducing the fire truck money, and I don't know if you reduce that slightly, you could probably slip in the self-contained breathing apparatus.
Well, the 25 would cover it?
Well, if you reduced it to 50, I mean, I think you'd probably be able to get very close to what the original 1.435 was.
Well, let me ask you a question. You've
But
said, I want to make sure I understood that the 18,000 that wasn't spent was put back into the operational budget. Okay.
The operational budget was balanced with the use of Stevens less than the $18,000 less in capital.
You know, on the fire department compressor, I must say, I still don't quite understand the necessity of it. One, obviously, I hear breathing, that sounds important, but, and then I also heard, that people aren't going to be as sophisticated. I mean, I guess this would be where getting some of the detail that you talked about, on the thumb drive would be useful. So.
It's to fill tanks, Alex. They have the tanks.
Yeah.
It's to refill them, is what this thing does.
Okay. But you're saying that we can or cannot do that now?
I thought we could. I know that when we do switch over to the new tanks, that there are other, like, I think we can go to another, because it lasts a while. When you fill them, they last for some time.
Yeah.
And I think we could go to, I thought he said we'd go to East Long Meadow and do it in a short term. We do need one of these eventually. Like I said, there's nothing on here that is kind of a, hey, wouldn't this be great to have?
Right.
Everything on here is a need. We just try and stage it from year to year
Right,
for the
right.
highest pressing priority. And he said we could defer on this one for a year.
I mean, I guess this would be where, we were talking about having the chief come in and explain this a little bit. This would be another point, because literally, if people can't, breathe while they're fighting fires, this would be the very highest thing, right? It would be above every single thing, right? And so that's what I'm trying to understand, To me, it kind of seems like it's either way high or, it's way low, it's not, in the middle.
And Alex, the point, unfortunately, I know a little bit about this, but breathing air is different from any other kind of air compressor. You have to have oil-free air, and it has to be obviously extraordinarily oil-free air. So the air compressors you get at the gas stations, whatever they're doing, they're spitting oil, and there's some low levels of oil in that air. Obviously, you can't have any oil in self-contained breathing apparatuses. So the compressors are very, very different compressors. They get to be expensive, and in fact, what they've done with these things is because Scott Company or any of the other companies that make these Scott air packs, it's like the Gillette razor and the blades. You get new, they obsolete the tanks, and then they obsolete the system that fills the tanks because they're kind of, so you need to be able to do that. It's not like, gee, we'll change the fitting on the end of the hose and it'll fill the new kind of tank. It's an intentional obsolescence. So the question is, if as we get more and more new tanks of the new model, and I assume we've probably got both models right now, more and more we're going to be relying on being able to fill new tanks, and therefore we got to get the whole. Now I think we probably have tanks of two different styles, and so some of them we can fill, and the others you go over to East Long Meadow. Is that a fair?
I do want to apologize because the conversation with the chief was, I'm trying to make this all work within our cap. Can you do without this for a year? Yeah. Okay, thanks. And then we had a brief chit chat about, and which I just shared the extent of my knowledge on it. He must have had a more detailed conversation with the capital planning committee. I wasn't present for that, but like I said, I think you have a lot of questions about the fire stuff. I think having him come here Monday to answer them directly is probably the most effective way, or I could have him write a report. Sports choice.
I have a question. Under major infrastructure, Linwood Drive sidewalk, I doubt very much if that's a sidewalk job. That's likely a drainage job.
No,
It's the
that's
new
the folks that
sidewalk.
came in and wanted the
We
sidewalk.
received a petition.
Oh, that's an extension. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
And that's one as well. I do think it would be a good place to put a sidewalk because there are sidewalks and it is a cut-through street, one we did study when we were looking at cut-throughs. But they came in, I think, last year, and so I do think it should be it is on our 5-year plan, but it is relatively new, and that was one of the, and if we fully funded sidewalks 1 year, I think this would be a case where you could just say, we're gonna spend all our sidewalk money on Linwood Drive,
Yeah, that's right.
but it just didn't work out that way because we downgraded the sidewalks a little bit to get the numbers to work.
I don't think I could ever stress what it's going to seem like if you go ahead and replace the handicap ramp or the accessibility ramp and all the sidewalks and everything else at Storrs Library and leave that asphalt there. It's
No,
just, I just beyond my wildest imagination that we could ever do that. It's just, and I know you tried to get the money, and I can't fathom that.
I think, like I said, Richard, if worse comes to worse, we would lump it onto a paving like a road
Right.
reconstruction paving contract.
Right.
Now, that's at the expense of
It's at the
roads,
expense of a road, right?
but we would not leave it undone like
And we've
that.
already cut the roads.
Right.
You know, I wonder if there'd be any appetite on the board if you took that 219,000 and took that project and added maybe even Woodbrook drainage, or Willowbrook drainage, 124, and put that out on a band and freed that much money to go back in and pick up some of the critical needs in capital this year that can't be a band.
That's fine, but how are you gonna pay the interest on the band?
Magic.
That,
But we got the wizard here. He's right here.
well, but it's not free. I mean, you're paying.
We know
it-
it's not free.
It's not free. Eventually, first of all, you gotta pay the interest, and eventually you gotta pay back the principal.
And you have banned stuff before, and you made a recommendation, and I've argued with you against them. This time I want to do it. You want to argue with me?
No,
So-
no, I'm just,
The fact is, I'm trying to find some way that would make sense. It really bothers me quite a bit that we've got a $219,000 drainage project sprung out of no place, and that we're going to take it out of out of base dollars, instead of going ahead and tying it in with another drainage project like we normally would do and put it under bond.
Stephen, on the Crestview Circle, and I know you live there, because I've had a project on my street, so I'm not, I'm
Yeah,
new here.
we're still digging in front of your place.
Yeah, I know, we will be for a while, yeah, well, but when the snow melts, we'll fix it, I guess. But in that project, because I was reading up on that, and I saw the pictures of it, and we're talking about really going in and digging up the whole culvert, rebuilding it from the bottom up, put new piping in and stuff like that. I'm sure that they looked at, can you slip a sleeve in there and make it, a concrete sleeve, and that's not gonna work for that.
I think because of the deterioration, I think the slip lining is more when you have a concrete culvert existing. And again, this is one we can have Mike or Yum come here and explain the details on it more. I have to tell you, it's actually kind of a funny story. I walk my kids to school, so I walk over that culvert every day, and it was actually Mark's boss, who's my neighbor, Mr. Grinspoon, who said, "Hey, did you see that giant sinkhole over there?" And I thought he was talking like a pothole. And I go over and there's this 5-foot sinkhole, and I'm like, I never noticed it. But we filled it, and then a few weeks later, after some heavy rains, it was down again, and so they went. And I was, believe me, we had the conversation when I said, "Do we need to do this?" And the answer I got was, "No, you can just jump over, the hole in the ground." Because I realized that when it's on your street, and all of a sudden it comes out of nowhere and becomes a priority. And
Oh,
I guess
not that, it's on your street, and your neighbors say, "Stephen, why isn't that done?"
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I shouldn't get special benefits because I live there, but my neighbors shouldn't be penalized because I live there either.
Yeah,
They were penalized enough as it is.
No, okay, that answered, because that was just my question. And I know that's an easy thing to think of, but I'm sure they thought of it, and that's why I just wanted to ask the question, because obviously if you could just slip something in there,
Yeah.
it's a heck of a lot cheaper than
Well, if you saw the picture
$219,000.
that he sent, the bottom has rotted and come up, and so the thin corrugated steel sides are really what's holding the whole thing up, and they're rusting away. And it's really, when you look at the face of it, it's got to be 10 or 15 feet down. I mean, it's a huge, huge excavation.
Okay, and there's get back to our discussion, there's another inevitable thing that's going to happen, and I think we'll all agree. We're not going to annualize our money and pay out of the debt that we're in. There has to be bans, there has to be bond issues. There's no other way to get around. We can't make some of the repairs that are coming up without it. That's why I was suggesting the fact is, this is a simple one that we could even throw it in for $250, and if you took the $219 back into base dollars, you'd pick up your $70, your $90, and the $45,000 for the scuba system at $205. You'd eliminate 3 projects that really was wanted. And I understand we do pick up a debt, but it's a fairly minor one at a $215,000. Or we take it $250, we take it right on the minimum of the cap that Mr. Sturgill just mentioned. I just want to throw it out for consideration, because sooner or later, we know we're going to eventually get to that point where we're going to have to
Can you
ban.
just say what you said again? I didn't quite catch it all.
Take the drainage job, they got the,
That
they
we
got,
just talked about, the Crestview one?
right, they got the,
Okay.
that was release money from FY15, chapter $90.
Okay,
Go ahead and use it in the program to pick up the $90,000 driveway at the library, the $70,000 center school paving job, and pick up the $45,000 scuba tank replacement system. Since it's there and it's a small amount of money, a relatively small amount of money for budget.
okay.
Then you could go, he could put a band out for $250,000 to go ahead and do the Crestview job, since it must be done. Crestview must be done. That's a project that has a life cycle of likely 50 to 75 years once it's repaired. So it's one that you would consider banning or bonding on.
But we would, I mean, I remember doing this last, us doing something, you know, to Mark's suggestion, that we were able to, I mean, you'd have to still fit within the levy, right? I mean, so,
Those are debt exclusions outside of the levy. It's an override outside of the levy.
so is that what you're suggesting, is an override?
Yeah, I'm
It's
just
not
suggesting to the
operational.
board that we view this a little
Right.
bit differently, and we got our CFO to tell us if it can be done and what's.
No,
the
but I
ban.
mean, is that what you're talking about, is
Yeah.
a debt exclusion override?
Yeah, it's just, or a ban, it would be a.
No.
I,
Two different things, Richard.
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
you've
not
got
debt
you've got
exclusion,
two
so
different
yeah,
things.
yeah.
I mean, if there's a
Debt override, we don't have to worry about raising taxes, and we don't have to worry about finding the money, it's gonna be raised in taxes. If we're just talking about doing a revenue, or a regular ban, that has to come under the Prop 2.5 levy limit, and we have to fit it in with the numbers that we're dealing with, which I think we can probably do. But again, there are two different subject matters there, with the debt exclusion and the non-debt exclusion.
Right.
So, Richard, one of the things we've done this year is increase the allocation to capital.
Mhm.
And I believe that the policy says we will increase it again next year,
Right.
right? Okay.
Mhm.
There is a school of thought that says, take that allocation and that increased allocate, and commit that to principal and interest payments on a bond
Mhm.
forever, for 20 years, and then it goes to another bond.
Mhm.
And then next year's increase, that goes to a bond. And so
Mhm.
what you're doing is committing that extra capital to do bigger items, a lot more, and you can do that for the next, I think, 4 years, or the 4 increments we have. Right, Paul, that we were going to increment the capital,
Until we got to 5%?
well, till we got, or we cried uncle, I
Yeah.
think, but,
Yeah.
but we could do that at least for 1 or 2 years.
Mhm.
And instead of only getting an extra, I don't know, $200,000 worth of projects, you actually can get, I don't know, 10 times that amount out
Right,
once.
right,
And the second year you can get it again.
right.
And then you're paying it off, but you're paying it off out of operating budget and operating budget capital.
Mhm.
And if people have a desire to do that, I'd rather see us do that than do a debt exclusion override, which tells everybody our taxes are going up more than 2.5%.
If you do a ban, your taxes are going up too.
Well, Paul.
Sure they are. It has to come out of the operational budget
Paul
to
said
pay
he
for
might be
it.
able to swing it though with the existing tax.
That's,
Right, but Paul, what I'm suggesting is, it's coming out of the operating budget that we were allocating for capital. But that allocation is for principal and interest on a bond.
I understand, and we did that last year, and I voted against it because basically what you're doing is you're taking your projects, what we did with Bannon is putting them on a credit card.
Mhm.
That's the equivalent, that's the equivalent of what
It
you're
is.
talking about now, is putting them on a
Right.
credit
It is,
card.
it is.
And then we just took bands and converted them to bonds.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
Or
did.
didn't, one of them were not. gonna
Sometimes
do
we
that.
don't.
Some we did, some we didn't.
Right.
Yeah, because you had
We took some
fantastic
bands, and
rates.
we didn't take all of them, we took some
Right,
bands,
yeah.
and we converted them to
Yeah,
bonds.
'cause you had
Which means we took them
fantastic
from the
rates.
credit card and refinanced and put them on the mortgage.
Right,
And so now we're gonna go back on the credit card.
He refinanced his
because
debt.
we cleared off the credit card, we took it all off the
No,
credit card.
we didn't
put it
clear
on
off all the
mortgage.
credit
Yeah, we
card.
did, we put it on the mortgage.
We clear part of the credit card.
Right.
And there comes a point in time where sometimes you have to live with what you got, and I understand there's a need out there. I don't think anybody is disputing the need, but I think at some point in time, you have to say who's going to pay for 30 years of neglect, or it wasn't neglect, it was 30 years of funding it the way they funded it. And at some point in time, where do you start to squeeze the people and have on top of it a council on aging building, a DPW facility, and a school building, and say, well, we just went from credit card to credit card to credit card, now we're going to go to mortgage, mortgage, mortgage. And that's why sometimes what it is what it is. And there are priorities, and sometimes you got to live within the means of the priorities and say, yeah, you'd like to have $400,000, you could like $4 million more with roads.
Mhm.
But we didn't do that.
Mhm.
And so at some point, you have to stop going to the credit card, I think, when we're going to take, we're going into a cycle we have expanded the tax rate so much in the last 5-6 years that it's getting to the point where it's going to break people in this town. And people in Long Meadow will pay for services, quality services, but by suggesting that we go and take the monies and put them on bands, because we're lucky right now because of where interest rates are. And I've said it before, give me 2% and let's borrow $100 million, but no one's got the appetite for that either. But if we're gonna go and keep doing that, at some point in time, you're either gonna band it or the bands will kill you with interest rates.
Well, it's going to take leadership as we move forward. And it.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
It's going to take
Leadership and-
leadership, and it is going to take making hard decisions, and it is going to take bonds. There's no question about it, because if we keep our present growth rate, it's impossible to do anything. So if we don't improve, and that was the last credit report that we talked about, the figures are stacking against us because we do not have any growth in our community. So we've got to find innovative ways to create growth, and I think that will come from the board leadership. And like Paul, there's nothing you said's wrong. It's all true. But you've also got an infrastructure that's decaying and falling down, and we've got to stretch our imagination to make things work. It can't be just a flat statement, we're not going to do this, not going to do that, because it's not going to work. Unless you tell us which streets we're just not going to take care of anymore, and we'll just quit maintaining them, we'll decommission the streets. Yeah, Marie.
Actually, I'm a little confused. On let's say the Crestview Circle, you were talking about looking to do the project through a band, but it says we're going to do it through the Chapter 90 funds.
Right.
So why would we be taking a ban on it?
Because that is a drainage
We'd have to
project.
bonds, then put this money here, and then take this money and put it up there.
Oh, and the Chapter 90, I see you're saying taking the Chapter 90 money and
Right.
put it into payment.
Right, that drainage project
And-
is a project that'll last for 50 to 75 years in life cycle.
Right, and I think my first thought was when you said to do that, is in the past, we've taken some drainage projects and we've paid out of cash. In fact, we rolled over, I think it was our healthcare fund to pay a drainage project a couple of years ago. It makes sense to ban drainage projects, but we don't need to look at an override. I think we could just figure out what the cost would be in order to pay for it within capital. And one of the things you were talking about, which was taking a little bit of the differential every year and rolling it up and expanding our work that way. And I think there's nothing wrong with what I would call that would be creative financing, because right now, interest rates are low. Now, in 3 or 4 years, that might not make sense. But if you're going to be doing it, it makes sense to put on a ban in regards to a project like this, which is drainage, long-term project. And the other comment that was made by Paul Pasturchik, which was take the fire truck fund, I know some people feel uncomfortable about that, take it down to 50, and then that's another way of paying for your compressor. But I guess the big question is, if we do follow Richard's idea of trying to ban the Crestview project, how much would that cost us every year to maintain that ban?
You're talking maybe about 60,000 at the most.
So we'd have to find 60.
For the life of the,
Yeah, I mean, and that's using a high interest rate.
yeah, that's for the life of it.
Right.
Oh, so that's for the life of it, not the yearly cost.
That would be the first year, we'd actually decline slightly
It
thereafter.
would be the first
yearly
year.
cost for the life of the band.
For the life of the band, okay. So I guess if we were going to put a ban on a project, the 219 makes sense, But the question is, where are you going to get the 60,000? Because you need to pay for it, I would believe, in capital.
Well, that's why we turned it over to the CFO, and he said he thought he could do it within the existing budget. And maybe he can. That's what these discussions are about.
I mean, and the other question would be, to find the extra 10,000, if we reduce the fire truck money, 50,000, you can replace it with that project almost on a dollar-for-dollar basis.
Right.
I mean, it's as simple as that, technically.
So you would say your 60,000 you were going to be finding out of operational, not out of the capital?
Your capital plan, instead of the 1.43 number, may end up being 1.41. And that additional money that we had originally set aside when we did our projections would end up in the operating aspect, where we had set aside 1.43, again, would end up in the operating budget as opposed to the capital budget.
No, Paul, I've got a question. Last year, when we borrowed money, like
Yes.
through the band, within the levy limit,
Yes.
I guess I assume that those payments that were, do they appear in this
No.
sheet? So
No.
where are they in the budget?
There's a section in the budget called debt service
Yeah.
for principal and interest. The payments would show up in those line items.
So in other words, we're sort of taking the capital expense that we approved last year, and it's sort of excluded from this year's capital
It's
budget.
excluded from this year's capital. It becomes an operating expense until they're retired, in essence.
So in a way, though, I mean, the payment that we're making on last year's loan, if you will, I mean, that
Should have
is,
come out of this year's capital also, Alex.
well, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
So
it really should have.
we're actually paying more for capital than this really indicates.
Right on.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
if I recall correctly, when you did the capital program, I thought you were not going to be bonding anything out of the capital allocation.
Yeah, we didn't. Last year we didn't. We tried
So
to,
you have
but
a
it was
policy
stopped.
that says you're gonna try to put away 2%
Right.
or 2.5%, and that's gonna be for cash purchases of equipment and not for debt service. So
Right.
You ready to move on?
you can't have
Yeah.
it.
And I don't know if I guess my thing is,
with you.
we can,
Paul, and I'm with you now.
you can do a
I'm glad
ban
you guys are together.
on things. I think what I would say is,
Let you sit over here.
I would look at maybe the 5-year plan, because I think we may hit a year where we get a couple of projects that are, for like something fails, like a Crestview Culvert type situation, or the Greenwood Pool, which is $225,000, where you're really stretched so thin where you are now really substantially reducing paving or sidewalks or things like that. This capital plan doesn't get us really there. I guess what I would say is perhaps defer on the idea of the ban until you're in a year where you're really stretched so thin that, emergency situations are not being attended to. Because like I said, you can't,
I was already gonna move on.
all right, sorry.
That's why I was saying move on when you
All right,
started
my fault,
talking.
my fault.
Actually, because I want to stay on what we were just talking about for a moment, because this kind of relates to something that you were talking about last year. You gave that big presentation on, this very scary, state of roads, and if you don't take care of them, the cost of it goes way up. And you were saying if it gets so bad, then you're spending all of your budget on just, Band-Aiding stuff.
Right.
One of the question that I posed at this time last year, which I never got an answer to, is how much of our paving budget is for this Band-Aid stuff, and how much of it is sort of maintaining it, so that we're not getting to that point. I mean, you made a point of if you repair it early on, the amount per mile is much less.
Radically down.
Much less. And I guess that sort of goes to the question, which Stephen posed, are we in that emergency situation? Because the way I read your presentation last year was, if we are at the point where we're spending all this money on emergency stuff and just sort of responding to the, pothole that's, enormous of the day, then that sounds like an emergency situation. I just don't have a sense of that. Are we sort of, I think one of your slides last year, you had a curve, you
Right.
know, like,
Asphalt curve.
you know, where are we on that curve, you know, on average? And that's something that we ought to know, you know, when we're deciding, should we bond out or ban out, you know, further pavement, you know, because I think if we're at a certain point on the curve, then you'd want to do that. If not, then maybe not.
According to the last study that we had, we are likely in the range of about $28 million in deficiencies on roads right now. And I think it's growing at $9,000 a day, I think the figure was. It's an astronomical figure.
But I guess my question is, like, in the last year, we allocated a certain amount for pavement, right?
Right.
How much of that is sort of proactive?
Mike could tell us exactly how he's done it. Whether he's done a
Right.
full depth overlay,
Right.
that's full repair.
Right.
If you do that 1-inch skim like on Converse, that basically is emergency repair. It's gonna get you a couple of years, but, it's a Band-Aid. That's a Band-Aid.
Right. Well, and probably at the far end is, you know, filling a big pothole.
Right, and that's
I mean,
maintenance. They're gonna
Right.
do that regardless of having the money. That's in their base
Yeah,
budget.
they do have some money in their street maintenance budget. They have crack sealing, so they do have funds that do that. Like a lot of times, you'll have a drainage project like Laurel Street, and so the funds to do the underground work were, you know, sewer funds. But now they're going to mill and overlay the entire road. I think from Williams to at least Bliss, and that would probably come out of the paving money.
Mhm.
Actually, Mark has, I sent to the whole board the list of streets that they have projected. It was in the thing I forwarded from Yem. So, I mean, they do, the answer is, Alex, yes, they do have these things kind of projected in where they need to be.
Okay.
And I think it's, you know, there's paper, just like conceptually, there's this deficit on paper. But truthfully, it's really, you know, conditions in the field and, you know, what we can live with and what we can afford. That it's a balancing act, I guess is what I'm saying, where we try and balance it all out. And that's what we try to do with this plan this year and with the budget as well as last year. But I guess all the points are well taken, and I think it's good to look at it.
And I guess what I'm interested in, you know, and I think, Richard, you're saying that Mike could speak to it, is, you know, are we at the point where we're, you know, doing all this emergency stuff? Or are we doing projects that are going to make roads that last 12 or 15 years? you know?
Williams is a project that has a 12-year life cycle, 12 to
Right,
15.
right.
So that was a proper repair.
Okay, yeah.
It's the quick repairs like Converse, I said, it's where we could put in the money. It's like a 1-inch overlay.
Right.
That's only got a 2 to 3 year life. I think you can likely go.
But that was the intent when you put it down.
Right, that was the intent when it was
No, I
put down.
understand that, right.
That was we got to do something because it's falling apart.
And that would be interesting, I guess what I'd be interested in is the money that we put to pavement for this current fiscal
Mhm.
year, like, where's it going to, you know?
I can
And you
send
can
you
hit that.
I can say that. I can.
Okay.
we
Yeah,
have
he can get that.
information.
Mike's
Alright.
got Yama's got the punch
Yeah,
list that
I don't
shows
know if
where
I'd
it's
forwarded
going.
that to just you guys or the whole board.
But I mean, I guess, I want to know not just where it is, but like sort of the sort of qualitative information. Is this in the nature of emergency repair?
You'll be able to tell you
Okay,
that.
all right, there
We
we go.
have we have a pavement management system through our cartograph work management
Okay.
system, and they track it annually. So yes,
Okay.
we
All right.
can provide the information.
I think you'll find almost everything that they're scheduling, except maybe for Converse and stuff like that, is absolute repairs. There'll be
When
like,
you-
there'll be
when you-
12-year cycle
Okay,
repairs,
all
12 to
right.
15 years,
All right.
if they're lucky, if they can get that long.
Okay.
This winter's going to have a significant impact on our roads. It's yet to be determined how much damage has been done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of bad,
Yeah. And it's
Places.
just starting.
right.
Because we've been frozen hard now for 2.5 months, and boy, it's about ready to break loose. We're going to be able to name some of the potholes out there pretty quick.
Right.
And as I say, you ought to go down and take a look at the road going into Greenwood. It's
Right.
just unbelievable.
Right.
That road has been destroyed this year alone by frost heave, because all the cracks are in it and they'll never see them.
And is that, you said that was because there were cracks in the pavement and water gets in
Mhm.
there. So, I mean, that's because it wasn't in good condition before the winter
There's
started.
insufficient base material under that road to support the moisture level. When the frost heave starts coming up through the
Right,
gravel,
right.
it's able to bust through the gravel and keep lifting the road. There's too much moisture, or there's not enough bed material. I assume there's likely 4 or 5 inches of bed where it should be maybe 14 inches. So the frost normally is under the roads, but you don't, it can't lift up against the asphalt because it's down in the bed. Only when it hits the asphalt surface does it pop the road. And it's a fantastic example of a frost heave road down there. It's just unbelievable.
Okay.
You saw it today, you were in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I felt it.
It's
Didn't
amazing.
see it.
It's amazing. Yeah, you shut your
You
eyes.
never see them.
It's a cheap trip to Disney World. Just shut your eyes. Okay, back to the Mark and Paul show.
We never settled the question on the warrants. Draft a warrant, and you guys can go at it next week.
Should we draft the warrants with your inclusions, which was the changes that you were
Yeah.
making?
Yes.
It'd be easier to do it that way than delete them instead of trying to
Yeah.
add to
And
something.
Well,
the
I'll draft
additions
them.
are what, that we're adding?
Center playground, 70,000, stores, library, driveway, 90,000,
And why are
and
we
delete
adding?
25,000 from the fire
And
truck
why are
allocation.
we adding those and deleting those?
Yeah, we opted not, I didn't think we opted to put them
Because
in.
that's what the town manager's list was,
That was his addition, we asked what was different from capital, and so he said it'd be easier to delete it later if we decided we didn't want those, unless we're going to vote now on whether we're gonna accept the changes or just capital committee's direct list.
Well, you know what I'm gonna do too is, I'll do a clean spreadsheet, and without a lot of columns, that just has my recommendations and the capital planning's recommendations, funds available, and where the margin is, if that would help.
And, you know, the priorities, because what I've got here, all it says is CPA did not approve. What I don't know is how big of a priority it was for school committee or DPW.
That's on the original that I think I'd sent.
Okay,
while
I mean,
ago.
I guess if you're redoing the spreadsheets, all the information is there. I
I'm
mean,
happy to put
that's
that
fine.
in.
I mean, if we want to keep cross-referencing spreadsheets, that's fine.
I guess the way I look at it is, once I start making my recommendations, that for me, those recommendations are really for my guidance. I guess that's how I view it. So then because then the plan.
They're kind of important to me.
That's
I
why
mean- I mean, the
but
fact
it's
that-
it's the town manager's recommended plan of the Community Preservation Act, so I guess our prioritizations end up kind of superseding the prioritizations we receive, but I'm happy to include the column.
Right.
Okay. So we leave the issue at that? You're gonna modify the spreadsheet?
That would be awesome.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Then we'll come back and look. You ready? Ready, Paul? What'd you say?
I just sent everybody the information. It has 4 attachments. One of them is the pavement management program, and a narrative on Crestview.
And we're going to hear about the air compressor.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
Okay, what?
we're ready for your presentation.
I don't have a presentation. What I've got is
It's your show, you and Paul's show.
We just have a series of notes and recommendations. How's
Okay.
that?
So,
Right,
have
so-
at it.
Actually, I got a question.
Go
Well, I think the one thing that I'd like to start with, Mark, since you mentioned it, was the Ford Explorer out of the ambulance fund. That was one of the things that we discussed. And it's one of the things that neither of us would support, because I think it does stretch the ambulance fund beyond what an ambulance fund is meant for. And the other thing is that the fire department has another vehicle besides the chief's vehicle in that Explorer, which is a Ford 500. And I don't know what that car is used for versus, and that Ford 500's an all-wheel drive vehicle. So they do have another car in their, under their purview to use. And I know that, I don't know if the Ford Explorer carries equipment versus what's in the ambulance, but I'm just letting the board know that there is another vehicle that the fire department has. It's a Ford 500. I don't think the year,
I think that's fire inspections. Uses that.
okay. Well, in other words, there is another vehicle, so if they use it for fire inspections. Mark, where do you want to start? Do you want to go over the budget part, or, because there was some specific,
Yeah, why don't we just generally start with the
Okay.
overall budget? I'll do that, and then we can go through the
Okay.
recommendations. So the town manager prepared a budget after getting input from the department heads and the school committee, came up and has recommended a balanced budget, and I think the place to start is with the revenue. As we do every year, our revenue projections, or I should say Mr. Pasturzik and Mr. Crane's revenue projections tend to be conservative because we need to be there. And by that, we talk about things like not just tax growth, but also the non-tax revenue things, whether they be license fees, et cetera, meals taxes, that kind of thing. There was a significant growth projected for next year based on our actual receipts the first part of this year for motor vehicle excise tax. So that's going to be the one area that will show a little bit more income projections than we thought. There's a lot of talk about the governor's budget and all that kind of stuff. We didn't take any of that into account. Paul was relatively conservative on all that for income. So once you set the income, then it's how do you balance the expenses to meet the income. And the bottom line is that we're getting the same services we did this past year, and there are just some minor changes in several departments, and those kind of jumped out at us, and the town manager and CFO explained each one of them mostly to our satisfaction. I think one thing that continues to strike Paul and myself when we went through this is our negotiated salary changes and wage changes of 0 doesn't mean there's 0 increases in salaries year to year. We need to hear once again that people have built-in steps and other systems that do give some salary adjustments for some employees, not all of them, but some. And there was at least 1, maybe 2 reclassifications of employees in here. And so when you see a number that says, how come that salary went up, 6% when I thought we were zeros, that would explain that. So, but I think we needed to note that those that those were there. Excuse me. If we start through the top lines of the budget and work through, in town hall, which is covers a lot of them, the major change recommendation is in the building committee, where the town manager is recommending that our crafts inspection, which is primarily electrical and plumbing inspection.
Where are you? What page?
Right now, I am on page 3, I believe.
And this is the sheet?
Line item?
Yeah, I have the budget line detail.
The inspector's on page 6.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul, thank you.
Of the line item budget.
Oh, okay.
And they're right in the middle, Department of Inspection and Zoning.
So that Department of Inspection and Zoning, page 6, what you'll see is, and if you've got it in color, but there's for professional technical services inspectors, there's a reduction of $39,500, but for the plumbing, gas, electrical inspectors, there's an increase of $40,000. It's converting people from an
Independent
independent contractor fee-for-service basis to part-time employees of the town. And there's, that's a recommendation of the town manager. I think that's a major change. The question is, will they truly be, as effective? And when we went back, and Paul and I actually went back and started looking at the income that we generate from licenses, it overwhelms this number of $40,000 either way. So there's income that's set. The question is, are we better off doing it the way we did it, which was you need an inspection, you call a guy up and he gets paid for so much for the inspection, or to have people on staff to go out and do inspections?
And the only thing that we couldn't discern, Steve, was when you look up the license, the fees, it's all inclusive. It's not broken up just by plumbing and gas, or plumbing and electrical. So that was one of the questions that we had with that, because it includes the building inspector permits. And
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a printout that has the breakdown.
yeah.
you know, it's not a problem to get that.
Number of inspections?
Number of inspections was one of them too, but basically we're looking at, when we look at the permits, but I'm assuming they included Paul Healy's,
Yeah, what's the revenue we get from
the plumbing and.
plumbing and electrical separate from
There are
everything
two
else?
classifications of revenues. Stephen, I don't know if you'll be able to get it. It's on the Munis system. I don't know if you're looking, trying to get it, but it's in the Munis system. We have a classification for each one of those. And when I give you a report, it's a rolled up report.
Right.
So it's all in a licenses and permits category.
Right.
But I can give you the detail.
I have a question on that. And that is, are they going to be eligible for health insurance, or how about part of the pension system?
No, they would be
They would-
non-benefited employees,
Okay,
under
okay.
20 hours a week.
All right, thank you.
How would we know that, how could we keep them under 20 hours? I mean,
You assist
Schedule
your
'em.
employees, you give them a directive.
Yeah,
All right.
we just set their schedules. And there's a couple of things, I mean, the current independent contractors, get mileage, get a stipend, not even direct mileage, they get a stipend. And then they get another stipend for office work. Whereas this would all be included under the wage, and, you know, they don't keep extensive office hours, and so having them available to, either free up Paul Healy, you know, answer questions from contractors and things like that, to free up Paul Healy's time to do more planning and zoning work and enforcement work, or be there to receive information or help. We're transitioning to a new software program for permitting that'll need some explanation. So there's additional things that they could do that the current inspectors don't do. And of course, our priority is get the inspections done in a timely fashion, so people who want to unpack in their new kitchens aren't waiting for inspections, you know, an unreasonable amount of time. But the secondarily is to make sure we expand the services offered by the department and keep whoever we have in those positions very busy.
I want to back up, I think, 2 pages to just do the public safety, police and fire, and I do that because we took a look at a couple things. Paul specifically had a question about, which comes up every year, about police vehicle replacement and you know, the number of vehicles the police have, and we've asked, and we've received a schedule of the police vehicles, and there are, so I think we ought to have a discussion about that, just to have that discussion so we can say we had the discussion, because every year we seem to have a car in there, and we defer it till the end of the year, and whether we need it or not, and I think that, you know, it's $36,500, that was just the line item. The other area of public safety that needed to be just brought to attention is overtime. If you look at the aging of overtime, which I tried to go back and look at it throughout the year, you know, that overtime line item is used for 2 things. It's used for, obviously, filling in for people who are ill. You know, when you need overtime, something happens, if you had some area that you had extra duty and all that kind of stuff, not really extra duty that somebody's paying for, but where you needed additional officers on duty. But another large part of it is overtime for training. And, you know, the question is, does the overtime expand to fill the money available or not? And so our thought process was, what if we were to take the overtime for the police and the fire departments, which is a combined total of $450,000. It's $230,000 in police and $220,000 in the fire department, and take a little bit out of that, maybe 8 or 10%, put it into the reserve fund, leave it lumped together so that the 2 departments would use it because they are combined public safety, and leave it available if we really do need it, and really put a test to what's happening with the overtime. That's one line item potential that may happen. It's clearly, we're not going to cut out all the overtime. It includes the police department going to court if they have to go to court and all kinds of other things like that. And there isn't an intent to actually delete the money, but what I didn't mention is in this budget, one of the reductions was to the reserve fund, primarily because the reserve fund has never been used. So it might make some sense to do that, but if we're going to try to push things a little bit, maybe we need to boost the reserve fund just to have that money there. So that was a thought process as well. Paul, you have anything else you want to add on that?
I'm just going over my notes.
The other areas that, you know, we may be wanting to look at, we know that the fire chief announced his intent to retire, and there was an adjustment in the starting salary line item for the fire chief. The police chief has announced his intention to retire. We probably ought to make a slight adjustment in that. And we also noted that most every year that I've lived in town, we go back into the fall town meeting or spring town meeting to get more money for our snow removal line item. And rather than roll the dice on free cash or pulling it out of free cash or the reserve fund, we probably, you know, I don't know what next year's gonna be like, but if we put those few, I'm saying few, 15 or I think 18 or $20,000 cumulatively into the snow removal line item, it's clearly money that's gonna be used in the budget. I mean, it's just a matter of pay me now or pay me later, short of having a winter that has no snow. And I thought because we're trying to figure out ways how to boost the snow removal line item so we weren't so dependent upon, you know, funding it in the springtime. For the people at home, snow removal is the only line item in a town budget that you can deficit run by state law. So we're allowed to spend more than we have allocated for it, but then we got to go back in the spring and actually get the money. So
What page is that?
the snow removal is, yeah, line,
I found it. It's
it's
page 8.
Page 8, yeah. Right, it's $100,000. It's been we budget $100,000 every year for many, many, many years, and if you can look at what the actual expenditures are, it's never been $100,000. So, or at least
It
not.
just adds clarity to the budget.
Where, I'm sorry, where is the snow removal?
Under DPW.
Page 8, it's about a third of the way down, it says snow and ice removal on the left.
Okay, yep.
You know, in FY13, it was a quiet year, we still spent 167, and FY14, 290. This year, we
Where are we this year?
were 125, that was 2 weeks ago,
What
so.
was the number?
Remember a couple of weeks ago, we asked, and Mike said, and he knew right off the top of his head, he said 125 over.
125 over, yeah. I'm sure it's gonna be 250,000 by the time the winter's over.
So, Mark, what money you're trying to put into the snow and ice removal?
So what we're trying to do is take money out of if we took some money out of the police chief's salary,
Or you mean fire chief?
no, there's money already out of the fire chief. We did it out of the police chief as well.
Because he's about to retire?
Right, he is retiring.
And we just got notice from Stephen that the DPW director
So-
is as well, so.
Right, so, you know, I mean, clearly, if we could defer purchase of a police vehicle, we'd love to put that $36,500 also into the snow removal line item. I mean, we're gonna spend the money for snow removal.
But it's going out of free cash, because we can
Yeah, I
deficit
think-
spend it, right?
Well, right, Marie, but you know, it's budget it and spend it, or don't budget and spend it. I know we're gonna spend it, so the question is, you know, why not budget it?
The only reason we don't budget accurately is because we can fund it because we can
Exactly, we
overspend
can
it.
do it, and we know there's
No,
going to be
because-
the free
no, I'm just saying
cash.
the reason we don't do it accurately is because we,
Pretty common
Mhm.
Oh,
municipalities in the common to do this.
Oh, I'm not
And I
saying
don't
we
know,
shouldn't.
right, I'm saying I don't wanna, you know.
But the $100,000 is a plug number.
Right.
It
It
could
is.
just as easily be 50.
Most communities in the Commonwealth do this because of really Prop 2.5, because you have the pie
Right.
that's fixed. And so if you have the opportunity to not tie up your levy on something that you can deficit spend for, then, and I know DOR looks at that, you can't budget $5,000. I mean, DOR does look at it and has a sniff test, and so far, so far so good for municipalities of our size.
So far, $100,000 work, but if we haven't spent less than $150,000 in our recordable history, maybe we should just boost that up.
I hear you, Mark, and it is,
Oh, yeah.
it's one of these things where it is somewhat of a budget gimmick, but it's a budget gimmick that's so widespread that is it really a
Right,
gimmick anymore?
But I would argue that it's a great budget gimmick, because then if we want to, we're looking forward to saying, maybe someday we can actually bond the DPW as a budget line item by reducing our snow removal budget back down by $35,000.
Well, the problem with that is though, even if you add a small amount, you cannot reduce your snow removal budget if you overexpend a year prior. So
Okay.
you would not be able to do that unless there was a very mild winter and you only had expenditures of less than $100,000. So that's the caveat with that, Mark.
Right, so the reality, though, if you're really doing truth in budgeting for people, I mean, because, and I'm not saying we're not being deceitful, as Stephen mentioned, it's a common practice, but the
Yep.
reality is, I think there might have been 1 year in the last 10 where we didn't spend 100,000.
Absolutely.
Literally one, I think,
Yeah,
in the
no,
last 10.
if that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reality is, it's just we do it because we can, but
Yes.
the reality is that snow budget is at least, in most years, double what
I
we
just
really.
wanted to clarify the thought process.
Yeah.
At some point in time, reducing it, we would not be able to do that, that's all.
Okay. Well, I guess the question would be, Paul, how many years in a row have we used 100,000 as the plug number, and maybe it's time to bump that up to
Yeah.
125,000 or something like that, that's all.
Probably been 20 years, you know.
Right.
realistically.
So that's the only point of,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, a number like that is, I think is fine.
yeah.
I think you're right, I mean, it's just, you know,
And
Richard,
there were no other line items that we
I
were
was gonna
really.
make a comment.
Go ahead.
You know, I was gonna raise this at some point, this seems like an opportune time, because we were talking about the police vehicles. And I sent Stephen an email about this. I was a little disappointed that we didn't get a notebook like we did last year. And so I'm looking at last year's notebook and the police department, and it had and I see all this detail that would be really useful in this discussion that we're having right now. I mean, for example, we're talking about police vehicles. I mean, one of the things that they have is a listing of all the vehicles and what their mileage is and when they were purchased. I wanted to sort of make this general statement that I really want to have that level of information before I vote on this budget. And Stephen said he's working on it. He's going to try to get us a partial, or at least me a partial. But I really think we deserve that level of information. You know, to me, there's a world of difference between having a 200-page document and then a spreadsheet. You know, it has information. You know, last year, you know, we had, you know, the number of FTEs. You know, and you know the level of their responsibility. You know, what their rank is. I really think we need that information, you know, before we vote on it. And I guess the question I would pose to Stephen, because it wasn't quite illuminated in our email exchanges, are we going to get that prior to next week? You know, prior to, I mean, because, you know, that's the kind of conversation that we should be having. If we're going to talk about a police vehicle, we should have that kind of information.
the only thing I'd say is I appreciate the acknowledgement of the level of information in our GFOA budget booklet. I think as I alluded in our email, when we did this last year, presented the draft form, it was the first year we'd ever done it. So for all previous years, my understanding is a memo with a budget message like I sent out and a couple of spreadsheets. Is that, I mean, this was my first budget and the only one I've done here, so it was GFOA budget, but my understanding, past practice was what I sent out this year, the budget memo and spreadsheets. Last year when we sent it out, the discussion really went immediately from here back to the spreadsheets and the budget message, and this wasn't really talked about very much during the many hours of budget deliberations we had. And so because it's a lot of work to keep this updated, we ended up, through all the budget discussions, ended up updating certain sections multiple times, and it became really incredibly inefficient. We decided, and based on what we experienced last year, we decided to hold off on producing a kind of a polished version of the GFOA until the budget was, the numbers were set by the board, and then kind of go in and plug everything back in. The one thing I'll say is most of this book isn't going to change very much because it has org charts and the FTEs. Like I said, if there was big changes in the booklet, they would have been reflected in the budget message. But as I said, we can put together the kind of the progress draft is what I'll call it, and send it out. I don't know that it'll illustrate the decision points any better than the budget message in the spreadsheets. But
Well, I mean,
we're not withholding it. We just
right, no,
taking a
I
different
guess what I'm
approach.
getting at, I think I tried to make a very concrete example of how useful this information is on the very thing that we're discussing right now. And the thing that seems a little odd to me is that, we have committed, and GFOA says we ought to provide this level of information to citizens before they vote on it. And it seems kind of odd that we wouldn't have that same level of information in being the ones that are proposing it. I mean, we've got to really, the reality is most of the time the citizens approve the budget that we present, more or less. So we're at kind of a critical point in this. So for us to have less information, at this stage, it seems like a very bad idea. So I guess my question is, are we going to have this?
Not in a finalized form. I think what I'd say, Alex, is like I said, I'm learning as I go here. Last year, it seemed like the response was TMI on the book. And so this year, we did less, and now we will provide, because I don't know what questions are going to come up from the board. I think we try. We know some questions are going to come up. We try and give that information in advance of the question being asked. But something like I have a vehicle replacement plan for the police department. I can send it to, I've been sending emails as questions have come up. I've been sending in the information that I have, and I'll do that again in 2 minutes. But that's the way we kind of tried to play it, is as questions come up, give you the information that's in context versus giving the large book, because like I said, the feedback I think we got last year was this was a little overwhelming.
I don't really recall anybody saying that, but
And in all fairness, in prior year budgets, I've had two binders. One was the budget,
Mm-hmm.
which was a nice big thick binder, and the other one was the capital plan in a binder.
Well,
So-
he says he's going to deliver it before next week because the subcommittee has not requested it. And I can understand what you were looking for, Alex, and I wouldn't mind seeing it either. But I know all the numbers aren't going to be in there. It'll be rough draft. But it is a different way of looking at the budget, which is the GFOA.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting. So you said you will give us some sort of rough
We
draft.
did what we got.
And
Yeah, we
I know we probably won't be able to vote on it for a while because we're just beginning to work our way through it, so it'll be
We'll have the
advantageous.
draft out tomorrow afternoon of where we are with the work in progress.
Sounds great.
I mean, 'cause-
Thanks.
see, for me, I feel like my responsibility is to try to get behind the numbers a little bit and render a qualitative judgment on this budget. And, without this kind of sort of context, and just, to me, to compare, numbers on a spreadsheet, we're not really doing our job, it's not really, sufficient.
You get it out, Stephen? So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and if I could, just in defense of the town manager, we did not ask for it as part of the.
No, we've been
the
asking a lot of
finance-
questions,
Finance
yeah.
subcommittee. Though, there's only two other things that I just wanted to point out, and that's in the DPW, greater DPW budget. One is that the town manager is requesting, based on apparently a lot of feedback from our service users, to convert the janitorial services at the Greenwood Center from contract to town employee. That's on page 9. It's both for the daycare and the adult center. It's got to do with hours, it's got to do with level of service, a whole bunch of stuff. And so that shows up there, and it's not exactly a one-to-one reduction in contracted services with increased, but it's pretty close.
Is this the 37,440 you're
This
talking
is
about?
page 9, it's,
Yeah,
yes. Okay.
and we would be reducing,
You see the contract janitorial services down 35.9? About 5 lines below that?
okay. And does that 8,630 have to do with that number as well?
No, I don't believe so.
It doesn't? Because it says Greenwood
Yeah,
custodian.
so it could have something to do with it, but I'm not sure.
Do you know, Stephen?
I'm
No,
sorry.
that's maintenance overtime, isn't it?
But it says Greenwood custodian next to it is the primary reason. Page 9,
Oh,
Steve.
okay.
Which-
Minus 8630. You've eliminated maintenance overtime by 8630. You went from-
Actually, it wasn't requested. I mean, Stephen didn't eliminate, the department did
Right,
not request it.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So I think that wasn't part of the change, Al. The last thing I just want to point out is that throughout the DPW department, this was year 2 of 4, or 3 of 5, or 2 of 3, thank you, of reallocating the general administration across the 5 departments of the DPW. And Mr. Pasterzik did provide the subcommittee, and I assume it will be available, anybody else wants it, that breakdown between administrative to admin and streets, grounds maintenance, buildings maintenance.
Where are you?
This is not something you have, Alex.
And does that give us the total?
Yes.
Okay, I would like.
So, and there's sanitation, recycling, water, and sewer. So, for example, you can pick energy, electricity, okay? And how much goes toward admin and streets, how much goes toward water, and how much goes towards sewer. And you can pick, obviously personnel, you can divide the personnel out, but something like rentals and leases, that gets split out as well. So it was we'd asked for that just, and to try to find out on one piece of paper what the total is of the DPW as a major department, as opposed to on the spreadsheets we have, which is split out by department, so you can see, what each, how much overtime there was, for example, total in the department. That is one thing we're still trying to clarify is overtime, and I just have this personal question. So it turns out we have something called standby overtime, which is because we want to make sure, should there be a water main issue or a plumbing issue on the weekend, we have employees who must be available on call on the weekend. So they can't be in New York City or Boston. They have to be, I assume, within a certain number of minutes of getting in. So the question, and so that overtime is on the budget. I guess the question is,
Are we paying actual overtime?
It's a stipend.
it's a,
It's just a stipend?
A stipend unless they're called in, obviously.
Yeah, what's a percentage stipend?
stipend is,
I don't recall off the top of my head.
A percentage of their
No, I think it's a flat, it's a flat. Mike is generating a response on those questions. I have a draft of it, so I didn't share.
so the overall number is $11,000 for both the water department and the sewer department.
Quite a bit of money then.
So my question is, is there money to be saved by actually scheduling somebody on 5 days that include a weekend? So we actually take an employee and shift them so they get Mondays and Tuesdays off. Now, I know that has all kinds of implications about who's around Monday and Tuesday, and has all kinds of implications that you pay somebody for Saturday and Sunday, when in fact you may not need them. I get that. But I just thought I'd ask the
I think it
question.
goes beyond weekends, though. I think it's even after hours. If there's a night call, they're the
Okay.
first responders for a night call also, Mark, so it may not be just
Okay.
that weekend thing.
Right, but we also do things as simple as where we have people from facilities going in on the weekends and making sure the water levels in the
Yep.
boilers are right and that type of thing, and that's OT.
Yep.
Right, so.
Right,
to
yeah,
Mark's
yeah,
point,
there's-
what I'm saying is, you
Right,
know,
there's a possibility, but it's, in this particular standby, I believe it's a weekly amount for after hours, which would include, anytime from 4 PM till, 7 AM, and then your weekend hours and holiday.
This, the stipend is, the foreman gets 170 and the workers get 130. to be on call for the 7-day period. So it's for 7 days, they get an extra $130. And the foreman gets $170 to have the cell phone and be on call. And then if they get the call, it's 4-hour minimum. And I think, and he started talking about this, I know I went through this here and I think in Lancaster as well, when you kind of go through the scheduling. I think the work schedule is subject to bargaining.
I believe that whole provision regarding the callback or the standby pay is a provision within the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, or
So
it's a
it would take a
contractual
little bit
provision,
more
so
in
it
the
couldn't,
policy.
You couldn't do it unilaterally.
you couldn't do it to the budget document.
Right.
Okay.
But it's something that we've looked at, and I think, you go back and forth on what the right call is, and it's, you don't have supervisors necessarily working on the weekends, and you may be paying guys time and a half for 4 hours, but straight time for 8 hours is still more, and, there was a question about, are you getting the max out of them on Saturdays and Sundays? And I think that on the evaluation system, based on the experience here from years ago.
This wasn't a recommendation, it was
Yeah.
just an observation,
Okay.
I think, more than anything.
Yeah, and I think that, because the other thing, when you talk about it, when you think it through and you say, okay, look, in the summertime, we have parks that have barrels, and we've had these complaints over time that say the barrels get filled up on Saturdays, Sundays, or they're on Mondays, and so that's where the thought process was, is that if there's enough work on the weekend, is there a way to schedule someone, Wednesday through Sunday, or Wednesday through Sunday, and have Monday, Tuesday off, and save on overtime and have that person that you have, and I know companies do it, and I know it has to be bargained, but, they do it to fit the schedule, and that's where the idea or the thought was with that. Mark, you didn't touch on the capital.
Nope.
Okay. And I want to go back because Mark mentioned the police vehicles. 2 years ago, I brought up police vehicles. There were 12. We talked about it at the subcommittee meeting. As Stephen mentioned, he has a replacement schedule, but he also mentioned that for every one of those 12 vehicles, there's a purpose. And my response was, if there were 20 vehicles, we'd have a purpose too, and I think that would be accurate. But for years, we had 7 vehicles in the chief's car. We were buying them on a 2-2-3 schedule, and we're up to 12. And I know there's special circumstances. We have a couple new guys coming, a couple new cops coming in due to retirements, and we want to keep an old Crown Vic as a skid car. But there was 2 years ago where we weren't going to. They go to driver training. They want to skid it and beat it up, and okay. And then you get rid of it after those cops are on the force. But 2 years ago, we took a car that we were not going to purchase, and it ended up being purchased late in the year. That's why there's one this year. And I really do think that at some point in time, we have to really get a handle on why we have 12 vehicles in the police department. And I know there's a purpose for everyone, but it doesn't mean you need to have one. On the capital budget, what I want to just go over, Mark talked about the ideas that we had or thoughts we had on the operational issue. In the ambulance, as you heard from both of us, we came to the conclusion of not supporting that coming out of ambulance for the replacing car number 2, the Ford Explorer. The other thing that we talked about, and we're assuming the voting equipment was for replacing defective equipment.
There is one that did not work for us at the last election.
Right.
Those voting machines are 20 years old.
Right, so that's what, we just wanted to make,
Yeah.
we were just assuming that.
And you'd sent something.
I did send the intake form. I did send, while we're sitting here, the intake form, the request forms for the SCBA and the Explorer. And I guess I want to clarify, do you think the Explorer doesn't need to be replaced, or just don't pay for it out of ambulance fund?
Our discussion was that we don't believe that's what ambulance funds were used for.
Yeah, I have no
intended for.
judgment on whether it needs to be, I don't know if it needs to be. I just don't think it's an appropriate use, or, source of funds.
I think I'd want to go back, I think we'd want to go back and look at the policy more carefully and make
Well,
a further recommendation.
I mean, Mark, I guess the question is, should we be funding, right? We're gonna have to decide that. And,
But all I got is the thing on a piece of, I couldn't tell you how many miles are on the car, how
right,
old it is, I don't know.
this is the sort of thing we need to know before we're gonna decide to include that.
And then the only other thing that I think that we discussed on capital, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in DPW, we're gonna be purchasing $162,000 10-wheel dump truck, a backhoe that's gonna come out of general fund, water and sewer, and a 1-ton dump truck. And we brought this up to the town manager as well about the potential at the MMA. I don't know if you guys ran into the Hertz booth. but Hertz rents and leases equipment to municipalities, and I spoke with the folks at Hertz, I spoke with a DPW director who they work with in one town, and they're potentially, there's a potential to look at leasing some of this equipment versus purchasing.
And the key is, Paul, that you can seasonally lease it. So
Correct.
it's things that you'd only use part of the year.
So they have a 4-month minimum, for example, on a piece of equipment. So if you're taking a 10-wheel dump truck that's used for plowing, at the end of that 4 or 5 months, whatever you lease it out for, it goes back to them. And as this DPW director told me today, the only thing they're responsible for is the tires on the vehicle. And they do it, they have long-term leases, short-term leases. They use them for a variety of things. And I'm not saying Hertz is the one to go to, but there's got to be others out there like them. And I think before we commit that money, that it should be looked at as to whether or not it's feasible to do that. And I'm not saying it could be done on all 3 pieces of equipment, but there's 3 pieces of equipment that are going to run the town about $315,000 this year. And you're talking
You're
about,
saying the backhoe,
there's a backhoe, the big dump truck, and the 1-ton
yep.
dump, which was recommended by capital planning because the mower was put aside for this year. That's about $315,000. You don't save $315,000 because you have to pay something for the lease. But it also, I'm sure in the long run, would have some effect on our maintenance of vehicles if you're leasing some versus purchasing them all the time. And I would just, the thing that Mark and I talked about is we would recommend that we at least look into whether the lease is appropriate before we purchase them. Not take the money out of capital. Leave the money in capital and then,
Appropriate the money in capital.
right.
Contingent upon being released after a lease versus buy
Because if it
analysis.
comes back and it doesn't make sense, then the money's still there to
Still there.
purchase.
Okay.
And it's going to be, we started talking about it, it's not an insignificant amount of analysis, because the answer is, it depends on virtually every piece of equipment. It depends on how often you use it, it depends on how much it costs, and it depends on how long they last us. It's, like the 1-ton is 70-something, $74,000. But the one we're replacing is over 10 years old. Had we been paying lease payments on that vehicle for the duration of that 10 years, the lease payments would have vastly exceeded the purchase price.
Right.
And so it's that level of analysis of how long, but if you have a bucket loader and only lasts you 5 years, then yeah, leasing would be a better option than buying them new. We have to do some analysis on that, but Mike is working on it.
And I think the main point, though, is you're not looking at every piece of equipment, you're looking at the winter stock. The big stock that we don't
Correct.
use year-round, the big trucks,
Correct.
that's that's the most prime target. And, for instance, federal government, a lot of agencies, federal government, they don't own any of their vehicles. They lease everything to GSA. And they bring vehicles in and out all during the year based on needs. So the equipment is out there. I don't even know if we can tack into GSA or not. I don't know if we're eligible. I know Chad at one time had looked at some of the
Yeah,
GSA
I don't know
contracts.
that we are not.
But I mean, they're very successful in that. You find a lot of agencies, especially in our case, I think, Stephen, you and I have talked, if Mike sat down and said how many trucks does he need in the actual season, it would likely be a third of what we really have, the big ones. And they sit, and there's nobody to use them because they don't have enough operational needs to have all those big trucks roll.
Well, during the winter, they roll on virtually every snowstorm.
That's true, in the winter, so you lease them during the winter.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's no, I mean, it's one of those things where we talk about every vehicle having its purpose. We don't use the giant vehicles to, haul dirt for a small, if we grind a stump, we're not hauling the dirt to the site in one of those big trucks. But a 1-ton dump truck can't push the snow on our big roads, on our larger roadways, the way that we need it, especially when you see with this winter how hard it is to keep the roads open.
The
and-
big ones didn't push it either.
Well, better than the other ones would have.
This is
No,
exceptional
it's a good, as I think I
That's
told,
not a cheap job, by the way. That's a normal thing that's going to happen with snow
Yeah.
removal.
you
It's
know,
inevitable.
as I told the subcommittee, in Lancaster, we did both. We did lease some and we did buy some, and that also depended on our budget situation. It was a much smaller town. So I think leasing can be a viable option, and it's just going to take some work before we can just say we're going to lease a piece of equipment, because the thing you want to avoid is paying a premium
Mhm.
you know, it's.
That'll give
when
your
you
new
talk about
director something to get his teeth right into, or
Yeah.
her teeth right into, right off the bat.
Yeah,
Good
snow
for you.
removal, everyone's gonna want snow removal equipment for the same time that we want it. and-
Right.
But the
But you
difference
just-
is that they book it ahead of time. No one, and I would encourage you to really look into it, because in talking with the DPW director that I spoke with, it's automatic for them. They
Can you
rent
send me his
bu-
name?
Pardon? Yeah,
Send me his
they rent bucket loaders for snow removal in wintertime, because they actually go pick up the snow, and,
Right.
they use them for plowing, but they also use it for a lot of snow removal. And they use a variety of options. So, and same thing, he said, there's things that we buy because it doesn't make sense to lease them, but there are certain things, as soon as the winter's over, they put their order in for the next winter, and they have it on lease. Now, and the difference to us is that you're not gonna get rid of a payment, the payment's gotta go into the capital budget, or it's gotta go somewhere in there, but maybe instead of 168,000, that number goes down to 25 or 30, or whatever the number is per year, for however many years we do it, but,
A lot less than that, Paul.
well, no, I'm just, I don't know what the numbers are, but I will get you the information, because it was very helpful in discussing, and the guys at Hertz, and again, I'm not pushing them, they just happen to have a booth at the MMA, they deal with a lot of municipalities for whatever needs there are. Yeah, if you want to go rent a plow now, or in February, you probably weren't going to get one. But if you put the order in May or June, and that's what.
Well, that's when they
Yeah.
bring their fleet in, they base their fleet on your expectations.
Yeah.
So, I had one question, training. I only noticed one line item in the entire thing on training, and it was $850. Is training somehow scattered into these budgets and?
It's in almost every departmental budget. That you could look on page 1, you're gonna see professional development, training.
Okay, but how about just get into maintenance, Paul? I was looking at.
Oh, and maintenance, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I only
We're
saw
talking
it
about
listed.
training under maintenance.
Yeah, it was listed on page 10, is the only place I could find it in the maintenance division for training. It's at the, very, very close to the top of the page. I may have missed it, but $850. Now, there's overtime, there's in-state travel, so there's some other areas. What I was wondering, Stephen, that, if that is really true, and that's what they're programming, that's it's even a non-event. I mean, you can't do anything for $1,000 for training on a workforce that size.
As Paul said, each division has some built in. Grounds has 1,000 built in under, it's called employee training.
Right.
Which I may have missed it.
Okay, is that the one on page 10?
No, that's the
8.
one on page 8.
Okay, let me see, maybe I missed it then. Employee training, excuse me, I did miss that. Okay, they have 1,000, so that's about $1,800 for maybe the, even $1,000 for grounds, that's not much money, is it?
My guess is there are expenditures made for training, but they come out of the
Just-
catch-all other expense.
It's just not line item.
Right.
Okay.
It's not line item.
Because you don't,
Certain training usually gets tied to a continuing ed type thing, or certification for certain things.
right,
In like a labor position, we hire people who know how to do the stuff that we do.
right.
We have had safety Maya has come in and done safety trainings. So, I mean, we do trainings, but you're right, it is,
I just didn't see a lot of evidence of real training, and I know, as you all know, I forget what percentage we would normally have, but it would be more than what I see shown here, so.
like I said, I think that's something at some point in time, as we announced, we'll have a new director, so maybe that's something to
Right, maybe you could overhaul them,
look forward to
Yeah.
with a new director.
go
yeah.
line item by line item.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys, you all through with your recommendations?
But not in the new director.
So I guess if we went back to your recommendations, you were talking about, there was concern for the electrical plumbing inspector. Was the concern,
No, just
Well,
pointing
let's
it out.
Point it out.
okay, well, like I say, it's a
Okay,
concern.
yeah.
You pointed it out.
Right.
Was your fact of endorsing it or not endorsing it?
We're a little split on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go 50/50?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and you talked about the overtime pay, and what, about 20% of the overtime?
No, it was even just 10%.
10%? And diverting it into a
Into the
reserve fund?
Reserve fund.
So
right.
it's not allocated anywhere else if
Nope.
it's needed and, that type of thing.
Yeah, you only need a finance committee to get it back. If you had some kind of disaster or something, and you needed to get the overtime money back quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Right.
could just go to finance committee
Right.
immediately.
Right.
Um,
You get it quick.
and I could request it,
Right.
the fire
Yeah.
chief could request it, so.
Right.
I mean, what would be the logic of only doing 8 or 10%?
Because what historically, I think if you, and I'm going to speak maybe out of school a little bit, but I think if you really look at it, is that a lot of overtime gets spent at the end of the year, or a good piece of it.
No, I understand the phenomena.
Right.
I'm well
So-
aware of it.
So
Christmas
the issue is that if it's really needed, then it's in the reserve fund.
Right,
If
I
it's
get
not
that
needed,
point.
it stays in the reserve fund, and you've freed up $50,000 for the year.
I guess my question is why not have a larger percentage?
Because I think if you do 40 or 50,000 and you see that it works, then you can look at, instead of doing 200,000 and having a reserve fund request every other week or something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I agree with you. I mean, you know, I come from Washington DC, and one of the perennial issues, has probably gone 20 or 30 years, that they have hit their head over, you know, against a wall, is police overtime, just out of control, you know, and they've tried everything to limit it, and because everybody's in court, they want to be in court, you know, they're in court for many hours, and, you know, the number of mechanisms by which to stay in court as long as you can to get, you know, are you know, incredible. And you're right. I mean, having that overtime, that pool, people want to tap into it, no doubt. I mean, I guess the thing is, if you're really trying to attack that problem, I don't know, reducing the pool by 8 or 10%, I don't think that's really gonna accomplish much. I mean, I think you'd have to cut it more substantially to sort of communicate that intention.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's the intention we want to, I want to
Okay.
communicate. I think I want to make sure that they need what they have and make a second step. I also don't think we should be hamstringing the fire and police department on overtime, having to run to the finance committee on a frequent basis. I think it's a start, Alex, that's clearly.
It's still 48 hours, and I guess I want to clarify, I don't know that anyone's made the suggestion that we have a problem with police overtime abuse. You know, our departments are well managed, and the chiefs really are the captains and the officers are really the ones who look to make sure that overtime isn't kind of this great, you know, retirement program for officers. The thing about the overtime budget is it's not just court. It is someone sustains a long-term injury, you have to fill that shift largely through overtime. You could have somebody who's in the military who gets deployed for 6 months, and fill those shifts using overtime.
I think we're likely all aware of that. I think it was just 10%. It's a start.
Yeah, I haven't talked to the chiefs about it, but it doesn't strike me as a great inconvenience.
Yeah, the money's still there anyway. They just have to justify it with more than reserve fund. Marie, do you have a comment?
No, that was
Okay,
it.
the other comment that seemed like came from the committee was the ambulance money coming out of that fund to buy a vehicle. Did I capture all the comments that you guys had?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't know, my notes, you raised a question about the police vehicle.
Yeah. You didn't get back to that one, did you?
The
No, I
Green,
didn't.
the Greenwood custodian,
The what?
the Greenwood custodian, whether that.
Well, that's what we were doing, and we didn't raise a concern. I mean, what we did was point out that there's a shift of dollars
Right.
from the contractual services over to a custodian.
Right.
There's an increase in cost, but it's going, was it an increase or decrease?
No, it's basically a wash on salary. If you look at overall cost of our health insurance benefit to Scannick Valley, the overall cost of health insurance, because it'll be a benefited employee, and then if you look at our OPEB liability long-term, it's a marginal increase on those two things. But in terms of what we pay for salary, it would be offset by a reduction in the custodial contract. I think what they're doing is they're basically summarizing our dialogue that we had at the subcommittee meetings, which is where Paul and I ran through the things that were in the budget message to kind of highlight things that I want to make sure that were changes in the budget from last year.
And you had your comments on the police vehicle, Paul. Remind me, what were they?
My comments and what we talked about is I think there's a year, this might be the year where you can go out without buying one, as there's 12 on the lot. And something's got to give at some point, whether we have a pickup truck, a Tahoe, and they all have their their defined purposes. On one hand, we have a fire department that needs an Explorer, and we've got a police department that has 12 vehicles. And again, I understand they each have a purpose, but if there were 20, they would each have a purpose. And I think it's something that for the board to consider. Is it a year which you can go without buying a police vehicle? That's all it is. It
Would you like more input from the division prior to
I
making?
don't think that would hurt at all.
Okay.
Yep.
So we.
Because, I mean, to that point, because I'm looking at last year's book, and again, obviously, the mileages have changed. It said the first line cruisers are 1, 3, 8, and 10, which I read as those are the ones that are going out every day on patrol. So that leaves a number of vehicles that aren't used to that level. I mean, I guess that's the question I have is, given that you have these other vehicles that aren't used as frequently, do you need the extra one?
What else you got?
I
That
can
was it.
speak to that a little bit if you want. I mean, I can address the issue or not. It's up to you guys.
Why don't we hold on and see? Ford Explorer, you had for the fire department. I think you started out with that.
Right, and you asked us that we're
And you had a police, so you got a Ford Explorer in the police department and the vehicle in the police
right.
department.
And we were just, with the ambulance funding, our concern is that, and I think we stated that we don't.
Right,
believe
okay,
it's
yeah,
a
that was,
function of
right.
use.
We didn't say we weren't going to fund the Explorer, just don't take it out of the ambulance fund. Go ahead, Ray.
So I guess the questions I think we're still waiting here is the ambulance fund use, the weather analysis on the compressor, how, that decision was made, and then the other thing was, you're talking about police analysis.
I can address, can I just address it? I'll try and be brief. On the Explorer needs to be replaced. I mean, it is a emergency response vehicle. And so it does go out on emergency calls. And so, reliability is key, and the vehicle is getting older.
There wasn't a debate on it, it was just a funding source.
But it wasn't clear to me that, that.
It is now.
Okay, it is now.
Yeah,
So
that's
the
a
vehicle
funding
needs to be
source.
replaced. In terms of the police vehicles, and why there are 12, I think not every vehicle is a kind of a patrol response vehicle.
Could I make a recommendation that you have the chief come in and tell us?
Or a report.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
I sent everybody the list of vehicles and the replacement schedule and the mileage, and that's as of December of 2014. So
Oh, you just did it now.
I just did it earlier.
Oh, you just did it now, okay.
Earlier, a few
Then
minutes
maybe
ago.
we don't need any more explanation. We'll.
Yeah, if you take a look at it, and if you have further questions, maybe email me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess the question again, I'm looking at last year's book. I mean, it's not clear to me what all they're all used for.
Again, that's the thing. We don't need the chief to come here. I can go through that, but we can have the chief come here.
Alex, in this thing he sent us, it has primary use as a column.
Oh, yeah.
Patrol marked, inclement weather training, chief, detective bureau, patrol traffic unmarked, SRO backup, patrol supervisor, so there's a list of what they are.
And maybe you can address this, Stephen. How many people are on shift at any one
I
time?
don't think we want to put that out over the air. With all due respect, Alex, seriously.
Yeah, that's not the distribution.
Well, during the day you have detective bureau in, so during the day the police department is staffed. But in terms of, do you mean just on patrol?
No, I mean,
Yeah, and I agree, I don't think those are any things,
Yeah,
I
we don't
think
wanna
if you
talk.
want to go into executive session and answer that, I would more than fully support that.
Or you could send it to us.
Yeah, but definitely.
Because I would like to chew on all of
Yeah,
this,
fine.
You
rather
understand,
than,
don't you, Alex?
really make a decision now.
You just don't want the information private.
Alex, we can talk about this offline with the chief if you want more detail. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. So we've had our capital presentation, and we've had our presentation from our group. I think there was discussion, I have, with Paul, Mr. Pasturky said there would not be any reason for us to even attempt to vote on our budget until after we've had the public forum to make an official vote by this board, because we need to have a public forum
We're
first.
voting now?
Well, we can certainly vote on some of these individual items, Mark.
Why don't it be
No,
nice
no,
to spend
that's
some
just-
time thinking about it?
Yeah, we can,
the first time
I think
I've
we've had a good overview.
Yeah.
Is there any other needs from any other board member at the table for more information tonight?
Not tonight, but I want to thank the subcommittee from doing all this analysis and
Yeah.
background work
That
for
was
us. That
helpful.
was great.
If,
Yeah.
if this comes down like it looks like it's rolling, this will have been a exceptional year with the subcommittee's support in that.
Exceptional year for our chair.
Now, Chair done good. The subcommittee did this work.
I guess I would ask then, if it sounds like we're kind of in the denouement of the meeting here, I would ask, are we, do we want to address the schedule for next week?
What role are we in right now? What-
Denouement?
A dating mode, okay.
No, denouement, the
Oh, Dave Moe.
drama,
Yeah, he's speaking French.
the elements of a story where you have a build-up and
I would
You
bring
lost
this
us.
moment.
Boy, I think we just killed that whole buildup there by me asking that question, right?
Hands on the ambience of
Yeah.
this moment. Don't violate this.
since we're in the final death rattle of this meeting, is that
You see what Paul is
better?
saying back there? Paul is saying,
Yeah. So,
I don't think there's any-
do we want to address the schedule for next week? Are we just going to hold off
yes,
till this
we
forum?
certainly can. We-
Well,
Pardon?
just cancel it if we settle everything on Monday. Or you want
Yeah,
Tuesday
I
off?
wouldn't cancel it and change it now.
Yeah.
Not the forum.
No, change the schedule. I mean, we've got them laid out.
Okay.
If we need them,
What's our next meeting?
Monday.
Monday,
Monday.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Monday, Tuesday,
That gives us the
Wednesday.
weekend to hash through this, and there may be something else come out. You've got some information that you need to get back with us on.
The ambulance fund issue.
I mean, we got a form, the form's on Wednesday.
Right,
next
forms
week.
on Wednesday.
We may say Monday, we don't need a meeting Tuesday again.
Yeah.
I'd anticipate we won't.
Right, and we'll go to the forum on Wednesday and may need one meeting after that.
And our meeting on Monday should be rather small, because all you're gonna do is do a little clarification, and we're gonna maybe make some decisions on, or think about more of these recommendations and make a decision on it.
Yeah, I'd certainly like to put a little bit of decision behind that capital, which way do we go with capital?
Right. So we take some private time and.
Yeah. One last thing, I think,
Yeah.
the governor announced his numbers.
Right.
Oh, you did?
I think we're going to keep them the way we have them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you don't know what's going to happen through the legislative process.
Looking good though, isn't it?
It is looking favorable, not overwhelmingly, it's not a windfall, but it's looking slightly better than we have today. But because it is such a slight difference, I would recommend maintaining the numbers we're carrying, because we have not, it's still pending the legislative process.
Great.
Richard, can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
Right.
Hold on, I'm right with you, Alex, go ahead, Mark.
One of the things Paul and I spoke about a lot at our subcommittee meetings, and I alluded to it, I think, at our last meeting a little bit, is this whole idea of Prop 2.5 going from what was passed as a ceiling on tax revenue to becoming a floor. And I really want to dispel or get us to agree that we ought to dispel this idea that if we don't use the entire tax levy, my God, somebody's going to go there and gobble it up. I'd like to say we do what the right thing is, and if we're $10,000 below the levy, or we're $110,000 below the levy, we say that's what it ought to be, and we oppose the concept of somebody trying to spend it just because it's there, as if they were trying to break over the levy limit. I think at some point, we owe it to the people of Long Meadow to not just spend because we can, but spend because we need it. And that was kind of one of the things that Paul and I kept looking at when we talked about $5,000 here and $5,000 there. And yeah, we're putting it in the reserve fund in one case, and we're putting it into the snow plowing budget in another case. But part of that is because of the concern, if we don't put it somewhere else, somebody else will grab it. Excuse me. And maybe the best thing to do is just take it out and leave it out.
Who are you referring to? You say grab it. Who would be grabbing?
You haven't been on the board for 3 years, you don't know.
You got him really upset on that question.
You asked him to do that.
Yeah, hey.
Part of what I think, there's a lot of discussion as you do budgets and saying that if, with the thought process that if we didn't spend all this money and go up to 100% of the 2.5%, I'm not laughing at him, he sounds like I hope he's okay. We might need that ambulance here, but, I think what we're saying is, not what I think, but what we're saying is that, the perception is, if the budget was, if we came in and said there's $110,000 we didn't spend in levy limit, $110,000 in tax dollars, that somebody's gonna go to town meeting and put an article on the floor that says we want to spend 110,000 on, pick a subject. All-day kindergarten, new buses, whatever the heck it is, new cars, whatever. And a lot of times we budget in a defensive mode like that, saying, well, let's bump up this line item, bump up that line item.
So you're afraid citizens could come in?
No, that's the perception. I'm not afraid of that. I think,
Okay.
as Mark was saying, sometimes if you do that, then you go to town meeting and say, that's not the right thing to do. And here's why we're trying to save. And I think, again, what we talked about was if there's the potential to do that in the budget year, with everything that, we just talked about, there's not enough money to fund roads and sidewalks. That if you could save $110,000 in the budget, that's an every year savings of $110,000 plus 2.5 plus 2.5, that you could then do some bonding and budget and really do those things. Did I say that correctly while you were
Yes,
coughing
yes.
up a lung there?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, I apologize.
so that's what he was saying, is that the perception is, if we don't put it all in the budget and spend it all, then someone's gonna come to town meeting and say, I wanna make a motion to spend X number of dollars on whatever. Again, we didn't say we're afraid of that, we're just saying that's, I think what the perception is, that you have to budget that way. And I really do believe that if you start to save some money, that we have a lot of things on the agenda coming forward that are on our plates as a town, that I think it goes a long way in helping get some of those things passed.
Go ahead, Marie.
And I think you're talking the right thing, that we have to go forward. And I've been really struggling with this for a while on how we can go forward on it. And I think Richard has talked to me a little offline. I think we have to maybe this summer sit down and have a strategic planning, and it'll be finances, on how we're going to deal with the tax rates going forward in the next few years, and creatively start to look at where we need to be. I think that the Moody talk was a little bit of a wake-up call for us at the same time, but we can't just keep raising it 2.5% every single year. But we can't do that unless everyone's on the same page and we sit down and decide what the strategic plan is going forward and how we're going to get there. So I think it's worth it to sit down with the school committee, finance committee, the select board, and other relevant boards to decide how we're going to go forward. And I would say strategic planning on financial issues.
Yes, Steve.
I appreciate the comments, and I just want, because we're discussing the town manager's recommended budget that does propose to tax to the 2.5 cap. I just want to give some background on how I approached it. I'll be honest, I agree. I agree that we should not just automatically do it because we can. I think we do present a base level service budget. So even though there are some things that are going to be different, they don't have a large financial impact. It really wasn't easy to get the budget to balance out, and we did have to really squeeze a lot of things. I think my view is that if you don't want to tax to the levy cap, then you have to take those hard choices. And I guess the way I view it is the legislative branch ultimately has the final say. And the approach I made was, how do we achieve the greatest good for the greatest number through a balanced budget that I think the legislative branch would embrace, as well as the select board. I mean, I think there's some things that are reflected here that are based on things I've been hearing from you all year as well. But it's what works financially and what works from a policy standpoint and a service provision standpoint. And so I'm not, like I said, last year we were able to bring in a budget that was slightly, albeit slightly, under the Prop 2.5 cap. And that was our goal again this year. And I would say that from an operations standpoint, we're well under our Prop 2.5 cap. And I want that, I talked about that Monday night, and I want that to be noted, that we're under 2.5% for operations, well under it. The board's policy decisions on capital and OPEB, which I think are good policies to have, kind of drive us up. And that has, even though it's taxed to the max, if you will, this year, that's going to pay big dividends for the same taxpayers down the line. So I just want to say that for your benefit and for the folks at home, that we just don't look at it and say, well, let's go with everything just because we can. We did like I said, cut some things, and I know the school department worked hard to cut things on their end, to deliver a budget increase that was, really less than they would consider to be base level.
And I think if the budget was out and every person in our town read the budget and saw the personnel spread and realized what we're up against, that there's a massive increase each year just in labor cost and supplies and materials. We go to stores like everybody else, so we buy supplies and materials for the operation, the fuels and everything else, the vehicles. And we have the same thing that our family has, except on a larger scale. But ours is labor. I mean, what are we, about 80% of our budget is labor driven. And we got
It's
77 to 80%.
Yep, we get
somewhere in
benefits and pension contributions and things like that.
right, and then we've got a lot of other absolute fixed costs that are out there that we can't touch, so it's a battle. It's easy to say, but hard to do, isn't it, Paul?
Just a little bit.
It's easy to say and hard to do.
In costs beyond our control, last summer when oil
Right.
was high, you go out to bid projects and they're coming back higher than you thought. We went to this on the tennis courts. We never expected to be those bids that high. And so costs in the private sector that are going up through either contracts or vendor arrangements or something else get filtered back to us beyond our control. And that either means we do less or we have to spend more.
And there was another point that I'll make real quick and we'll get out of here. In the 30s, when our town was developing, our tax base was just quadrupling, almost overnight. The houses were being built and the money was rolling in. We were putting all this brand new infrastructure in because the money was there. We're no longer building, we're no longer growing, but the infrastructure's there, and now we're up to the replacement cycle, and that's what we're looking in the future. And what's kind of scary is that we don't have the revenue difference between the years on income coming in that they had during that period of time. And they were the heyday years when we were growing up to the 70s, and then it started to flatten out. And we're flat now, except for, whatever people are remodeling their homes and occasional one or two homes, but that's it. So it is hard. It's hard to balance this budget, hard to keep it in line. Go ahead, Alan.
I just wanted to follow up on something Stephen said. You said that it was hard to balance the budget. There were hard. I guess the thing that hasn't come across to me yet is like given the 0% increases in salary, and I understand the steps, but we always have the steps. What was it? Sort of big picture wise, what was it that was making it so hard?
Oh, you were absent Monday. I'm sorry.
No.
Our retirement assessment went up substantially, and again, we wanted to comply with the capital policy, 2.5%, and
Right.
the OPEB policy.
But like healthcare,
Healthcare was a zero, which
right?
was,
So
which
that was
good.
good, right?
School.
Schools they have higher personnel costs, and electricity and gas costs. They signed those contracts; those are all gone up quite a bit.
As an electricity, wholesale-wise, residential has gone up 30%. What's it done wholesale-wise? Do you have any guesstimation?
I think the school number went up like 25 to 30%.
In fuel, in natural gas, in what, the
there's
next
a big
3 to
jump on the
5
school
years is
side.
going to double?
But
I'm
the
not
school
sure
only
where
went
I
up,
could bid.
was it 1.6%, right?
The school,
The school budget?
Yeah.
School
yeah.
budget.
Their budget did, Alex, but their request from the general fund support went up more than that because there was a decrease in state contracts or state aid or whatever
They
you call
have
it.
school all funds, which is their overall budget, and then they've got school general fund, which is the subject portion here.
Right.
It was 2.29% increase on the general fund.
Okay.
And that doesn't count the benefits stuff.
But there was a deficit on the other
Right,
side.
that doesn't include anything to
Doesn't
do
include
with
the
the
benefits.
We have
benefits.
supplement.
Yeah,
That's
I
still-
don't know if you had a chance to look at the budget message I sent out. I go in some
did,
level
yeah.
of detail, and then I did send out this, which explains it a little better. But those, like I said, there was a couple of bigger items. Like I said, the pension being a big one, and then everything is just a lot of smaller things. But it just was, it got, and like I said, and really the policies. I don't know how much the difference in capital, it had to be $300,000 or $400,000 additional to do the OPEB and the capital.
Between, it was 400,000, it was like 118 and 287 on the capital. And what we had to do is, we had to revert back, we had a very aggressive retirement schedule for some of those bands. We had to pull back on that and go back to the 5-year plan. You notice that the debt was reduced from the request to what was actually done. Again, we had to reevaluate the debt program. So,
Okay.
Okay, anything else for the general go? Okay, as we close, I'd like to thank Paul and the town manager for an exceptional job on the budget this year, and I'd like to thank the finance subcommittee. I really mean it. You guys did a fantastic job, because if this is all the pain we're going to have, this was a fairly small transfusion. Okay? Appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, folks, we're going to adjourn, and we'll see you on Monday night. That's 3/9, and we'll continue our budget and likely wrap it up.
There you go, yep, there you
Yeah.
go.
I tell you what.